And we are live with today's pre-show of our N10-009 Network Plus study group. All right, we've got all of the things going here. I've been working on getting the stream up and running. We've got video inputs, look super good. We've got recordings going here. I've already done the podcast intro. So far, so good on the pre-show. I think things are working swimmingly. This only means that there is potential for danger in our future. You always have to wonder, like, things are going way too well. Things are moving along swimmingly. What did we forget? What is not going to work later? Everything seems to be working fine. Hello, chat room. Hello, everyone. Thanks for joining us. We have about 8 minutes, just under, before we get things started here. I have, of course, all new questions for you in this first hour. In fact, I will put up the link so that you can get to the virtual map that we have here. You can put your virtual pin into the map wherever you happen to be in the world so that others can see that as well. Hopefully I turned it on so that you can see that. Yes, you can see that. So you can see it on your side, not just on my side. Somehow that's the way it works. Absolute in the chat room. PaaS Security Plus today. Congratulations. I need like an applause noisemaker here. I need something to pot that up and hit a button. In fact, I have it. Actually, I have that built into the, in fact, is there even, what kind of sound do we have on this? We have all kinds of weird sounds on it. Just nothing good, actually. But I need to come up with those. I could just hit a button and we would hear noisemakers or applause or cheering, because that's what I think when I see someone say, pass my Security Plus. Congratulations, Absolute, on your new Security Plus certification. Great score. That's got to feel good, right? It's always after you finish the exam, you walk out of there. It's been months, certainly weeks of your time, in many cases, months of your hard work, and you walk in and you crush it. It feels so good walking out. In fact, you don't even have to crush it. I just want to get the right score to pass. I don't even care about doing a perfect score. I just need a passing score. And ultimately, that's all that matters, is the passing score. If you did that, you did the right thing. It just depends. So congratulations on that. Thanks for joining us today and telling us that. I know it's the Network Plus Study Group. It's such a great story. When we get stories like that, it's very motivating. It pumps me up. Gives me a reason, not for a living, but you know what I mean. It's like there's a purpose to what we are doing here. And it's nice to see when we get to just one of those stories. It's such a good feeling. So we all work together and we all succeeded. I love it. I love it. Gabriel says, pass Network Plus by studying 4 months. See, that sounds about right. Sounds about normal. My videos only while doing 45-minute cycling sessions. This is the way to do it. See, you can come out 4 months afterwards. Not only are you certified, but you're a little more buff. You're a little more in shape. You can go up that extra flight of stairs when you're doing that. And heck, 45-minute sessions over 4 months, you probably, you did not miss leg day for sure. So now you need another certification just for the upper body. So we got to work on that and figure out what would we do to make that happen? Okay, we got about 3 minutes and 10 seconds to go before we get things started here. Thanks for joining us. Settle in, get a drink, make yourself comfortable. We will go through that process. Oh, Gabriel says, yeah, studying Network Plus. Now we need to work on the upper body. Maybe something that can give us a little resistance training, something along those lines. Doesn't have to all be pumping. It doesn't all have to be aerobic. We can have some muscle in there too, right? We can work on that. That's a great combo, by the way. Studying and fitness. Maybe one drives the other. Maybe they swap back and forth as to which one drives the other. But it's so great that you have the option. That's the way to do it. There's more Orlando folks checking in. The Orlando connections are here. Windermere checking in, or wherever you are. That's where I am, I guess. Sort of in that area, that southern area of Orange County. I like to hang out. So works out well. Hello, London, UK. Thank you for specifying the UK part, because there's quite a few Londons around. So I appreciate you letting us know that. Haven't been to London in a while. I need to work on that. I love London. So for sure. Is this setup a little overkill? Absolutely. Absolutely it is. By design, to be fair, this is a much smaller configuration than we've ever had. So that all works out. We've got streaming here. We've got video switching here. These two monitors are my daily drivers. And then we have the presentation system. That's really it. There's not much more. There's some recording systems down here, and there's some audio equipment and video equipment down here. But basically everything you see here runs the entire thing, which is remarkable. This is, we've worked hard to get everything onto one desk, and there it is. We got it on the desk. It works out perfect. So now we work on Network Plus. That's what we're doing today. So I have all new Network Plus configurations and the things that we do. We're all good to go. This is not just the streaming configuration, but when we are not streaming, these left two large monitors are turned off. Those are powered down. I work really on the two that are on my front and right. The laptop is pushed back. We don't use that. So basically, when we're not live, there's really not much happening here. It's a normal actually, the screens come back towards me. You know, we readjust where they are. They're on arms. I can move them wherever I'd like. But it's one where it's very different when you're not live. There's not as many blinky lights. There's not as many screens are on. It's not near as exciting, but it is a nice studio to work in, because I can sit here and then work on creating the content, pop quiz questions for the week, work on the book, et cetera, et cetera. And then we've got plenty of space to work. It's a very open and quiet area to work. It works out very well. We've spent a long time, obviously, thinking about this and trying to figure out what would be an optimal work environment for what we do. So there you go. That is what we do. Do we have Core 1 study groups? I don't do any for the 1100 series, since those retire in September. We already moved over to the 1200 series, but we do. Last week, for example, we did two study groups for A+, Core 1 and Core 2, but for the 1201 and 1202. But we've got 3 years worth of reruns you can watch. 3 years of on-demand Core 1 to 2011-01 study groups you could go through. And they're all just as valid 3 years ago as they are today, because the exam objectives did not change a thing in the last 3 years. So you're good. Study group schedule is available at professormesser.com/calendar or at the events channel on our Discord. So we'll make that happen too. Well, we've got a lot to work through today. We got less than a minute to go before we get started, but we will have all Network Plus coming. If you would like to answer or ask, questions for later, you can do that by going to professormesser.com/QA. That is not only where you can ask questions for the second hour, that is where we will be answering questions in this first hour. So you can even see we've got quite a few people that have checked in over here on the big map from all over the world. Thank you so much for joining us, everybody, even in the middle of what is sort of the, not really Indian Ocean, is it? Is it sort of? Out there, we've got South America checking in. South Africa is here. A lot of folks in North America, folks checking in from Europe. Thank you so much for joining us. We got a lot going on. Folks checking in from North Florida, checking in from Two Egg, checking in from Bluntstown, checking in from Monticello. Thank you for being here. 12 noon, everybody. That means we can actually do a live stream, right? Let's do a live stream right this very second. We'll turn off these things. We'll turn on those things. We'll make all of this work. We'll change this around. And let's turn on, one moment, please. We're rearranging things on this side. I need my keynote to be clicking away as we get ready to go. And let's do a live stream. Hello, everyone. Welcome to the August 2025 Professor Messer N10-009 Network Plus Study Group. This is the study group where I ask you questions that come directly from the CompTIA exam objectives. And if you are here live and joining us, you can interactively join us to determine what you think the right answer might be. And then we'll go through all of the answers and see exactly why the right answer is right, maybe why some of those wrong answers are wrong. If you are here live, we would love for you to join us. One way that you could do that is following us by going to a new browser window. Just pop open a new tab and go over to the link that is on your screen, professormesser.com/QA. That is the link that will get you to all of the questions and give you a chance to answer right there on the screen in real time. Now, if you're watching this on a replay, that's okay. That link obviously won't be available to you on a replay, but you can still follow along with us. Just make a mental note on what you think the right answer might be. And why don't we start with a question? As always, of course, our standing rules are please no answers in the chat room. Please no hints in the chat room. Instead, we want to answer this question by visiting the link on your screen, professormesser.com/QA. The question we have for you is a question from last month. So we call this our rewind question. The rewind question asks, a laptop has received an API-PA address, but the DHCP server is operational and responds to pings. Which of the following is the most likely reason for this issue? Is the answer, well, I suppose I should put those up on the screen, shouldn't I? Is the answer 802.1x authentication required, pool exhaustion, gateway of last resort not configured, duplicate IP address on the local subnet, or the DHCP server needs a static route? Now, all 5 of those are things that could be a problem, but only one is really associated with this particular issue. If you think you know the answer, again, please no answers in the chat room. Please no hints in the chat room. Instead, to answer this question, head over to professormesser.com/QA, and we will discuss your answers with that in just a moment. Thank you so much for joining us. We do one of these study groups every month for the Network Plus exam. And of course, we have an entire archive of study groups where you can go back and watch every single one of these replays to get ready to take your Network Plus exam. Of course, we have a complete Network Plus training course on our YouTube channel. There's every minute of every video is out there. Nothing is behind a paywall. Nothing requires registration. You don't have to do anything special to gain access to this course. Our goal is to make these courses available to everybody so that they can get a new job in IT or get a better job in IT. Of course, when we are not doing one of these live streams, you can go to professormesser.com/YouTube to watch the videos. Of course, we also have a weekly Network Plus pop quiz question that's available on Twitter. It's available on Instagram. It's available on LinkedIn. You can find a lot of places. If you want to find us there, simply go to professormesser.com/Twitter or /X, professormesser.com/Instagram, professormesser.com/LinkedIn. You get the idea. Simply type professormesser.com/ and the name of the place, and I think you'll be in pretty good shape there. You'll find exactly where it is supposed to be. The exam that we will be talking about today is the current version of the Network Plus exam called the N10-009. This was a version of the exam that was released on June the 20th of 2024, so it's really just over a year old, relatively young in the 3.5-year life cycle of these exams. We also have, if we measure that out then, 3.5 years, that means that this exam is probably going to retire somewhere around the 4th calendar quarter of 2027. That means if you are currently studying for this version of the Network Plus exam, you have exactly the right version, and you don't have to worry about this version changing anytime soon. The exam itself is 90 minutes in length with a maximum of 90 questions. You could get fewer than 90 questions on your exam. The score that you're shooting for is a 720, and that is graded on a scale between 100 and 900. I get emails all the time after these live streams saying, wait, I don't understand. There's a 100 to 900. It's not 0 to 900. It is not. It is more confusing than that. I think intentionally so. I think they're trying to make it so that their grading scheme is unique to CompTIA, and they have succeeded. That is exactly what it is. The score that you need to make is a 720. That's the only thing you need to worry about. Did you make a 720? Good. Then you pass this particular exam. The exam itself consists of different kinds of questions, both multiple choice-based questions, we just had one of those, and performance-based questions, and we will have a performance-based question before we are done today. Don't forget that not only is our entire course available for free, but we have other study materials that can help you with your Network Plus training. They are all on our website at professormesser.com/netsuccess. We have downloadable versions of our videos along with MP3 audio files. We have course notes and so much more there on our website. You can find out more by visiting professormesser.com/netsuccess. I also have a video replay of this live stream available immediately afterwards on YouTube. I also create an audio-only podcast version so that you can simply subscribe to it with your favorite podcast listening program, and then wherever you happen to be, you can bring it up and listen to it, even if you aren't anywhere near an internet connection at the moment. This is great if you're in the car, if you're working out, you don't have a way to watch a screen, but you can listen in on what we're doing. You can find out more about that or add it to your favorite podcast listening program at professormesser.com/podcast. And if you are on a streaming media service, a streaming music service or podcast service like Spotify, for example, you can simply search for Professor Messer. We're already on there. You'll find it, click on it, and you can start listening right away. Another thing you'll notice is that about a day after we are done, the YouTube video description will be updated with a series of detailed timestamps and explanations of what exists at that timestamp. This is thanks to my marketing manager, Lori, who's watching this on the replay. Hey, Lori. She's going through and making sure that all of these timestamps are accurate and complete. Of course, she's probably watching this, and as well as the replay for the chat is going by at probably 2x speed. So if you're someone who appreciates those timestamps and the information you're getting there, feel free to give Lori a shout out in the chat. Give her a hello. It's something that we enjoy doing, but hopefully it helps you as well with your studies. Also let you know that when we are not doing one of these live streams, we're usually over on our Discord. You can find it at professormesser.com/Discord, where myself and thousands and thousands and thousands of my friends are there, and they are studying for their A+, their Network+, their Security+, and other certifications. Those folks are able to open up a new study room on the Discord, as well as be able to manage that particular study room. So if you're someone who's trying to find other people to study with, or you simply have a question about some of the topics that you're studying, it's a great place to throw those out and get some feedback from other folks. You can find out more about that by following the links in the upper right of my website, or simply go to professormesser.com/Discord. I'll also let you know that eventually you probably want to take your Network Plus exam. And if you are in the US, Canada, or a US territory, we have discounted exam vouchers available on our website. You can find those at professormesser.com/vouchers. They're already discounted. You don't need a discount code. There's no secret password. There's nothing that you need to add to your browser. You simply go to professormesser.com/vouchers. And if you buy the voucher from my site, not only are you automatically getting a discount, you also have access to my exclusive Exam Hacks ebook. This is an ebook that you cannot buy. It is only bundled with a voucher or with my success bundles, and it provides you with a set of tips, tricks, and accumulated really study options that I have created through the years by taking all of these different IT certification exams. So if you need some tips on how to study a little better, or you'd like some tips and strategies on what you can do during the exam to perhaps get you a few extra points, they are in the Exam Hacks ebook. You can find out more about our vouchers and more at professormesser.com/vouchers. Let's go back to the question we asked earlier, which is, a laptop has received an API-IPA address, but the DHCP server is operational and responds to pings. Which of the following is the most likely reason for this issue? Is it 802.1x authentication required? Is it pool exhaustion? Is it gateway of last resort not configured? Is it a duplicate IP address on the local subnet? Or is it the DHCP server needs a static route? Well, let's find out what you answered. Let's close our poll and see what we came up with. 67% of you say the answer is a pool exhaustion. We also have a number of different options. We have a double digits. 12% said there is a duplicate IP address on the local subnet, and then it's single digits. 8% said gateway of last resort not configured. 7% said 802.1x authentication required, and only 5% said the DHCP server needs a static route. Well, 67% of you said the answer was pool exhaustion, and you would be absolutely correct. That is the answer that we were looking for. In this particular case, we believe the DHCP server is working. The service is running. We can ping the device. It's accessible across the internet. Well, if the machine is running and the service is running, why don't I have a DHCP IP address? Why did I get an automatic private IP address assignment? That is the APIPA. Well, probably because the DHCP server's job is to hand out IP addresses until it runs out. And when the DHCP server runs out of IP addresses, you will not be able to get any assigned IP addresses from that device, and therefore you will fall back to an APIPA address. At this point, you may want to check your DHCP server, make sure it is up and running, and if it is running, you'll probably see very quickly that you have depleted your available IP address pool, and you will need to add additional IP addresses to be able to hand those out to other folks. You could also lower the lease time a bit. That might help you. That could also contribute to keeping the number of available addresses for other folks who might join. But this might be a case where we just need to monitor it a little bit better with some IP address management software, some IPAM. That might help you as well. So we do have a number of answers along with the pool exhaustion. 12% of you said there was a duplicate IP address on the local subnet. Well, in this particular case, we didn't get any messages that there were duplicate IP addresses. We weren't assigned a duplicate IP address. Normally, our operating systems these days will tell you on the screen, we've identified a duplicate IP address and can't assign it, and therefore you don't get any IP address. That didn't happen here. We just weren't able to get an assigned IP address from the DHCP server. 8% said the gateway of last resort was not configured. If that's the case, we would not be able to ping or otherwise communicate with that DHCP server. And in this case, it is responding to pings, so we don't really have a problem with the gateway. 7% of us said that 802.1x authentication is required. It's certainly required to do other things on the network, but the first process of getting an IP address does not commonly require an 802.1x authentication. How could you do 802.1x authentication if you don't have an IP address yet? There's a whole chicken and egg problem there. So that's not the issue we were looking at. And lastly, the DHCP server needs a static route. Again, we know it's not a routing issue because we were able to ping the device and get a response. In this case, the answer was indeed pool exhaustion. 67% of you got that one absolutely correct. Well done. Well, this is a multiple choice question. This is one where there is a single question to ask and there are multiple options to choose from. Even if you didn't know the answer to this one, you still had a 20% chance of getting it right. Just dumb luck, just the statistics, the random pick something, and 20% of the time you're going to randomly pick the right one. CompTIA wants to make things a little bit more difficult for you, though, so they've come up with a different style of question at the very beginning of the exam. For example, at the beginning of the exam, you will not get multiple choice questions. You will get a handful of performance-based questions. A performance-based question is simply anything that's not multiple choice. So this could be fill in the blank. It could be a matching question. It might put you at a command prompt and ask you to perform a function. You might have to put things in a particular order. It might be a drag and drop that you have to work with. As long as you know the exam objectives, it really doesn't matter how they ask the question. Everything that they're going to ask, whether it is a multiple choice question or a performance-based question, is all based on the exam objectives. So as I often tell people, don't worry about how they're asking the question, worry about what's in the question. And as long as you know the topics that are covered on the exam objectives, really doesn't matter how they ask it. You will know the answer to this question. Now, a lot of you have also sent me notes and said, let's do more hands-on real-time lab type scenarios. So I have one of those for you today. This is I'm going to call it a 4-step question, but it's really sort of a 3-step question. I want you to write down this particular information. I want you to perform the following troubleshooting steps. I want you to first, from this command prompt, although technically you can do this this is a Windows command prompt, you could do this from Linux or Mac OS as well. In fact, a lot of the screenshots, not in this case, but screenshots that I've done in previous ones were directly from Mac OS. They're similar commands and similar output. The 4 things I'd like you to do is first, identify the IP address and verify availability of the default gateway. This might actually be 2 commands in one single bullet there. So how could I identify the IP address? And this is in Windows, so it will be a very specific command that you will use, a Windows command, and verify availability of the default gateway. So what would you do to somebody says, hey, I need you to find the IP address of this device and verify the availability of the default gateway. Got it. Here's what I will type in. That's what you need to put in. The second thing I'd like you to tell me is I want to view the MAC address, or in this case, it should be just a single address. There's only one MAC address on the default gateway. So I want to view the MAC address of the default gateway, even though it says addresses. So the MAC address, there's a single MAC. How would we do that? How would we view the MAC address of that default gateway? Give me the command that will tell me that. And then I want you to verify the availability of 1.1.1.1. We're going to see if we can communicate out to the internet. What command would we use for that? So these are really 3 or 4 separate commands that we would be using at this point. Now you're going to get a response of 1.1.1.1, and then I want you to tell me why we can't view the MAC address of 1.1.1.1. Or can we? I want you to help me explain what's going on there. So those are the 4 things I would like you to tell me how you would do this. Normally in the exam, you're probably put on an active command prompt. You're actually typing these things in and seeing the feedback on your screen. And if you'd like to do that on your own computer, please feel free. Pop open a command prompt right now and go through these commands and see what you get. That would be a good way to test out these particular commands. It's not cheating. You're fine doing that. I have given you permission to open a command prompt, run them on your screen just to see if we really know what the answers to this one might be. Number of folks that are putting their answers in there right now, being able to give us more feedback on this. And it's something that gives us an idea or has us think about the way that some of these network technologies are working under the surface. And we will look at those to be able to view it as well. A lot of folks giving me more information on these. Nobody really telling me yet how to view the MAC address of the default gateway. I got a few actually that have come in, and yes, you have been able to show me some of that. Some folks are right on it. I think some folks have done this today. So this is actually a process that you will end up doing many times throughout your career. You're troubleshooting a connection and knowing IP addresses of the device you're using, knowing the IP address of the default gateway, and viewing MAC addresses can be very useful. In fact, we will talk more about some of that and where they come from and get a feel for what these commands might be. Remember that all of these commands will be Windows commands, although some of them will have a similarity to Linux and Mac OS. Some of the commands we will use here are identical. Some of the commands we will use here will be very different. So make sure you know those differences between those different operating systems. Number of you putting in your answers. I see them coming through on my side. You obviously don't see them on the screen here, but I'm watching, and a lot of folks are spot on. You guys are really good with your troubleshooting, apparently on the network side. Some of you making some guesses. Most of these guesses are not correct, but they're very good guesses. This is one where I put a lot of different questions into one single question. So we'll have to find out what this is. So people are in the chat room are already asking, well, how do I know if I got this right? Trust me, we will go through the whole thing so that you can see exactly what these differences are and what we might choose. In fact, let's start with the very first bullet that we have here. I want to, from this Windows computer, identify the IP address and verify availability of the default gateway. So I want to know, what is the IP address of the default gateway, and how do I know if it's working? How do I know if it's alive, if it's on the network? Well, to be able to do that, we probably need 2 different commands. We will start with the ipconfig command because we are in Windows. Windows is one that has the specific ipconfig option. It's a little different in the Linux world where we are either using the ifconfig or the IP command to be able to do this. And on Mac OS, we would probably just do either one of those as well. They work exactly the same on the Mac OS side. So ipconfig is definitely a Windows-only command. And look at the information it provides. It tells us our connection-specific DNS suffix. In this case, I really don't have a fully qualified domain name for this device. It's just on the local domain. There is an IPv6 address associated with this device, a temporary IPv6 address, and a link local IPv6 address. Thank you, IPv6, for making things so much easier for us. Lastly, we have the IPv4 IP address. This device is 192.168.1.98, has a subnet mask of 255.255.255.0. And then lastly, we have our default gateway of 192.168.1.90. What? Default gateway? That's what we needed to know. So the IP address of our default gateway is 192.168.1.99. So there you go. We have at least the first part of that problem solved with just a simple IP config command with no additional parameters. And the second part of this is verifying the availability of the default gateway. Can we reach the default gateway? Is the default gateway up and running? Are we at least able to verify that it's on the network? And to be able to do that, we simply perform a ping. And we would ping the IP address of the default gateway, which in this case is 192.168.1.99. And on my network, that's what they are. On your network, it's probably going to be a very different default gateway. I did not configure this default gateway because I would have made it 192.168.1.1. Is that the default gateway? It is not. The people that installed that particular network decided that a great default gateway would be a .99. They did. Eventually, I will be changing this, and it will be a banner day for me because it makes me twitch a little bit whenever I see that. So if we ping it, we can see that we did get a reply from that address, and we got 4 separate replies, which is the default for Windows. So at this point, we have accomplished step 1. We know what the IP address is of the default gateway, and we know what the IP address is, and we've determined that that default gateway is at least alive on the network. Is it routing? We don't know that. Is it even a router? We don't know that. We're assuming that it is because it has been configured with a default gateway. Obviously, the ping is only telling us that the IP address and adapter associated with that IP address are on the network and can communicate back and forth with us. So the next question that we have is, now that we know that it's on the network and we have pinged it, how could we view the MAC address of the default gateway? Well, that's an easy one. This is a command that works in Windows, in Linux, in macOS, the same way we would run the ARP command, ARP. ARP is the Address Resolution Protocol, and the ARP command is a utility in our operating system that gives us insight into what information is cached or temporarily locally stored in our ARP cache. So we can see on my machine, not a huge ARP cache. I just turned on this Windows computer. I did this single ping. And because I just pinged that device, the ARP that occurred prior to the ping is able to be stored locally in our ARP cache, at least for a number of minutes. The A shows us everything that is available in the cache. So we can see there are 2 entries in the cache. We have 192.168.1.99, and the physical address. The physical address is the MAC address of that device. And we can see on our local network, that device is 9 Charlie 05 Delta 6 Charlie Bravo Bravo 4 Charlie 3. That is the MAC address of the default gateway. We're able to see that. We're able to, in fact, if you go through and look at the unique identifier, the first 3 bytes of that address will probably point to, I think I'm running a Ubiquity router in that particular case. So that's what that's what that MAC address is telling us, at least to some degree, to find that that's there. Now let's do a similar thing, but let's now instead verify a different IP address. In this case, it's an IP address of 1.1.1.1. Those of you familiar with that particular IP address range know that that is identified with Cloudflare. That is the Cloudflare DNS, very popular DNS. So we already have gone through the process of verifying availability of the default gateway. So verifying the availability of 1.1.1.1 is exactly the same process. So a little bit of a repeat on that one. It's a ping command, and we're going to ping 1.1.1.1. Okay, that was an easy one. It's almost a repeat to be able to get that one done. The real question is, if we were to look at our ARP cache after this, there's no 1.1.1.1. I just did the ping. There's no way that it's already popped out of our ARP cache already, timed out of our ARP cache. The ARP cache usually sticks around for a minute or 2, depending on the operating system and the configuration, sometimes longer. So that now that we've done that, now that we ping 1.1.1.1, it's nowhere to be found. It's not there. So now the question becomes the last question that we have there, well, why can't we see it? Where did it go? Why are we not working with this? What is going on? So this is all about MAC addresses and IP addresses and why there is a difference. We sometimes get wrapped around the axle a little bit when we start talking about the way that certain protocols and certain network topologies operate. And we often talk about layer 2 as being switching and layer 3 as being routing. We often refer to our local subnet versus a subnet that's not local. And the reason we make those differences, those differentiations between those two, is because they work differently on the network. Everything communicating by MAC address is all communicating on a local subnet. In fact, most of the communication that you're doing right now is one MAC address device talking to the MAC address of another device. Now, above that, there's IP addresses and other things, but at the most basic level of networking, for Ethernet networking, we communicate by sending information to a separate IP address or separate MAC address. I do not want to misstate this, or else we're really going to be in a pickle. So when we're communicating on the network, by default, it's MAC address to MAC address all the time. But obviously, we're using IP addresses as well. We have DHCP, and we ping some IP addresses, and we got a default gateway. Well, that allows us to communicate outside of our local network and being able to communicate via IP version 4 and IP version 6. Those are the two most popular layer 3 protocols that we tend to use, the two that you're probably using as well. Those two protocols can communicate outside of our local network, but we are only sending information to our default gateway. The default gateway takes care of it from there. We don't have any control over the path that it takes through the network, at least not in the vast majority of cases. There are ways that you can determine the actual route that your packet will take. You can set it yourself through something called source routing. That is a very, very unusual configuration and normally would only be done within someone's local network. It's almost impossible to source route across internet connections because those connections generally don't support that. The way that we do it now is what I call the convenience store method of routing. That's how routing generally works. It works the same way that convenience stores work. Here in the United States, if you're driving down the road, there's a 7-Eleven, there's a quick stop, there's a Swifty store. You stop, you get some gasoline, you get some chips, you get a soda, and you're on your way. Well, that's also the place where us guys will usually stop and say, how do we get to this place? And usually someone will talk to you about how you get to that place. And they'll give you instructions. And you go to the next quick stop down the road and you ask, all right, I got this far. Now how do I get to this address? Oh, now you have to go to the next place. So that sends you from one convenience store to another. It's the same way with routing. With routing, a router only knows where the next router is. It throws the router that direction. And that router then goes another link. So the routers have to know where their local routes are, but there's no central single router that knows where all the routes are, because that would be completely overwhelming. And that's one of the reasons why we don't communicate solely by MAC address. Imagine having to keep a table of every MAC address of every device in the world on your computer. It would be functionally, effectively impossible. You would not be able to do that on a single device, which is why we break the network up into separate subnets and we rely on the routers to get traffic between point A and point B. And amazingly enough, it all works. For that to work, of course, we are only communicating MAC address to MAC address on our local network. So if there's an IP address that's outside of our local subnet, we have no way to know what that MAC address might be. So the answer to the MAC address problem of 1.1.1, the reason we can't view the MAC address of 1.1.1.1 is because we are not on the local network of that device. If we were on that local subnet, let's say that we had an IP address of 1.1.1.2, we could then ping 1.1.1.1 and it would be in our ARP cache and we could see what its MAC address is. Another important part of that is we don't care what the MAC address is. It has nothing to do with our ability to communicate to that IP address. The routers are taking care of everything for us. We don't have to think about it. We don't have to configure anything for it. We don't have to troubleshoot it unless there's an actual routing problem between us and that device. So those are the steps that we needed to perform today. To do all of those different steps, we needed to identify the IP address of that device with an ipconfig command. That from there, we were able to get the default gateway and ping it. And then we were able to view that by looking at an arp-a command and being able to work through that. So this is one of these examples where knowing what you do and how to do it could be very important for you to be able to get this particular kind of question right if it happens to appear on your exam. Now, obviously, the questions on your exam can take any number of different forms. You might not get one at a command prompt. You might have a drag and drop, or you might have something you have to do from Windows front end, or maybe it's a simple putting things in order kind of question. Those types of things happen as well. But that can give you an idea of the way that you need to think through some of these command line prompts. Make sure you're very familiar, because obviously in Network Plus, there are a large number of command line utilities that we need to know. Make sure you become very, very familiar with those. They are all in the exam objectives. Well, you did very well. I looked through some of the answers we got for the performance-based question, and you guys did great with that one. Let's now shift gears back to a multiple choice question. Here is your multiple choice question that asks, a new network connection uses an SC connector. Which of the following would be the most likely use of this connection? Would it be it's a run from another building on campus, connects two devices in the same rack, it's a satellite network uplink, it's a router console interface, or it's an access point uplink? One of those will be the answer that we were looking for. A new network connection uses an SC connection. Which of the following would be the most likely use of that connection? Is it a run from another building on campus? Are we connecting two devices in the same rack? Is it a network uplink, a satellite network uplink? Is it a router console interface, or is it an access point uplink? If you know the answer, please go to the link on your screen. Go to professormesser.com/QA to answer this question. As always, of course, please no answers in the chat room. Please no hints in the chat room. We will instead step through this one. A lot of answers coming in quickly on this one. This might be one that you're familiar with already. A new network connection, plugging in different items. Who knows what this could be? It's got to be one of these. Which one would be the most likely use? Lock in your answer by visiting professormesser.com/QA and locking in that particular question. Maybe you know what this one is. Let's see how you did with this one. A new network connection uses an SC connector. Which of the following would be the most likely use of this connection? Is it a run from another building on campus? Are we connecting two devices in the same rack? Is it a satellite network uplink? Is it a router console interface? Or is it an access point uplink? Let's close our poll and see what you think the answer is. And we can see that 53% of you think that this is a run from another building on campus. 20% of you say that you're connecting two devices in the same rack. 12% of you say it's a router console interface. We have 9% that say it's an access point uplink, and another single digit, 7%, say it's a satellite network uplink. Obviously, the part of this question that is so important is the type of connector. It is an SC connector, and those of you familiar with an SC connector know that it is indeed a run from another building on campus is what we were looking for. Well, why would that be an SC connector? Well, an SC connector is a subscriber connector. This is what a subscriber connector looks like. Those are two subscriber connectors, technically speaking. Some people refer to these as square connectors because they kind of have that square look on the outside of them when you're plugging them in. They're very squarish when you're connecting them. Sometimes people refer to them as standard connectors. They're very similar in the way that they work. The important part of this connector, however, it's a fiber connector. So can't even see it because there is a ferrule that's protecting the fiber. There's a little piece of fiber right in the middle of that connector, and it's going all the way through that, probably over a very long distance, because this is fiber optics. If we're talking about fiber optics, we're either working in an environment where there is a lot of radio frequency interference, and we want to be sure that our runs over the network are not affected. Usually if you're in an environment that has a lot of industrial equipment, for example, maybe you work in a manufacturing facility. I did a lot of work with some folks that were an automobile manufacturer. So there were a lot of fiber runs, especially near the actual assembly line where they were putting together all of this equipment and all of these cars. So they would run a lot of fiber. That wasn't the question that we had, or at least wasn't one of the options that we had in the answers here. the answers that we had here, we had 7% a satellite network uplink. Most satellite network connections that you get are going to usually over coax from the satellite link and from that box that's plugging in, which is sort of your satellite modem. That's usually just a copper Ethernet connection that you would plug in. Same thing applies to a router console interface. That's usually a DB9 copper connection, usually a serial connection. You would never see fiber used for a router console interface because it's just not very common. You want to have a very common connection as your router console interface. These days, it's usually a USB type connection because those are indeed so common. An access point uplink, almost very similar to the satellite network uplink, probably is a copper connection for that one as well. And if you're connecting two devices in the same rack, you probably don't need fiber for that. They're in the same rack. You can literally touch both of them. So why not just get a 6 or a 10-foot copper cable and connect them that way? The most likely reason for a fiber optic connection would be to extend this over a very long distance. So this would be over in the world of networking, in the world of Ethernet networking, that very long distance would be anything over 100 meters, because 100 meters is the maximum distance of being able to send Ethernet signals over most types of copper cables. So instead of going 100 meters to this building that's on campus, we might need to go a kilometer. We might need to go 500 meters. We might need to go much farther. So because of that, we would want to have a way to directly connect those buildings together, and it's usually using fiber optics. Very, very common way to do that. 53% of you agree, and that is the answer that we were looking for. Of these 5 different things, that is the one that is the most likely use of an SC connector, because an SC connector is a fiber optic connection. It is not used for copper cables. So that would certainly make sense. If you're going to another building, that other building is almost certainly more than 100 meters away. Very easy to do the math on that one. And that's what 53% of you chose, and 53% of you got that one absolutely correct. Let's do another one. I have another one that's another abbreviation for you. This abbreviation asks, which of the following would be most likely found in an MDF? Would it be a workgroup switch, a wireless mouse and keyboard, a multifunction device, a database server, or a USB charging cable? Those are the 5 different items, but which one of them would be most likely found in an MDF? Would it be a workgroup switch, a wireless mouse and keyboard, a multifunction device, a database server, a USB charging cable? One of those has got to be the right answer. If you think you know the answer, go to professormesser.com/QA and lock in your answer. Please no answers in the chat room. Please no hints in the chat room. Instead, you want to put in your answer with the link that is on your screen right there, professormesser.com/QA. That QA stands for something. What does that QA stand for again? It stands for whatever it stands for, that's where you need to go. professormesser.com/QA. I have to figure that one out after we're done here today. This is also another one of those where it's useful to know an acronym, an abbreviation that is listed in MDF, yet another 3-letter acronym that we would work through. But it doesn't, even if you knew what the 3-letter acronym stood for, if you knew what M and D and F stand for, I don't know that you would be able to answer this question. And that is why I always tell you, don't just memorize the letters and the words, memorize why we are using that. What does that do for us? What does that bring to the table? What technology does that introduce? Or how would we implement this in a normal production network? That's what we're looking for an MDF. Let's see if you knew what the answer is. Which of the following would be most likely found in an MDF? Is it a workgroup switch, a wireless mouse and keyboard, a multifunction device, a database server, or a USB charging cable? We would close our poll, and we're a little torn, I think. We did not get a majority on this one. 43% of you, though, got the plurality of you chose the database server. 33% of you say it's a work group switch. 17% say it's a multifunction device. We've got 6% say it's a wireless mouse and keyboard, and 1%, just a tiny little sliver, say that it's a USB charging cable. This is one of those where You certainly could have multiples of these in an MDF, but that wasn't the question. The question was, what would most likely be in an MDF? I think the place where we should start is a question that describes what an MDF actually is a main distribution frame. Yeah, that doesn't help me. That term is not very helpful at all. That's why I tell you sometimes just memorizing the letters and the words don't always give you the information that you need. A main distribution frame. I got nothing. I'm not even sure what it's talking about. What that really is a central main computing facility. It goes kind of back to the days of mainframes in the terminology that we're using here, but you can think of it as the core of the network, at least in that particular building. It is usually a data center room, a main computing room. Maybe it's the place where all of the different switches on all of the other floors all connect back into this one secure facility known as the main distribution frame. So if you're bringing in any type of WAN connections, internet connections, cable modems, DSL, they're probably terminating in this single room. And you might have multiples of those, and all of them are terminating in the MDF. This is also compared to the IDF, which is the intermediate distribution frame. That is the one that's up on the floors of the building, and all of those IDFs connect to the primary single MDF. And it's often where you will be when you are troubleshooting the network, because all of those network links tend to go to that one single room. I guess if there was a workgroup switch somewhere, you would be doing things. Normally, you'd be in a room like this. There's your MDF. See, there's usually not quite. That one's very nice in its cabling. My MDFs would be a little bit more haphazard. They would be. This is not my MDF, but mine usually look something like that. There's a little bit more going on there. There's a lot more wires to be seen, but all still functional and all still in one room and all in something that we very often will refer to as the MDF. So if you're working somewhere and someone says, hey, can you go check in the MDF and see if we've really connected that and have it ready to turn on later in the weekend? Well, we can go into the MDF room to be able to see that happen. So that is what we were looking for. An MDF was what was there. It is 43% of you a database server, because that's where your centralized computing devices will be stored. That's where they'll be contained and managed, is in the MDF. All of the other options here are things that are not necessarily seen in an MDF. For example, a workgroup switch, it's not your MDF. The workgroup switch is on the floor where the workgroups are. Usually in the MDF, you have a core switch. So that's one of the reasons why that would not be the right answer. 17% of you said a multifunction device. These would obviously be devices that can print, they can scan, they can even fax. Yes, you can send facsimiles to people using a multifunction device. They can do a lot. These multifunction devices are useful, but they're usually where the users are. We do not usually have a multifunction device in the MDF. We have no reason to scan something in the middle of the computing center. So that would not work either. We have 6% of you said a wireless mouse and keyboard. And although a wireless mouse and keyboard they're probably in here somewhere. There's probably a mouse and keyboard, and it might even be a wireless mouse and keyboard. Probably not a good idea to have a wireless mouse and keyboard in the MDF. It's one of those times where you rarely use a mouse and keyboard in that room. In fact, if you're doing it right, you're probably rarely in that room at all. There's a reason why you might want to have a dark room where we call that a dark room, where nobody goes in there. You only go in there in very, very particular cases. And so this would not be something where people are going in and out all day. In fact, no one ever goes into that room without a very good reason. And for that reason, probably a wireless mouse and keyboard is not the most common thing you would find in an MDF. And then lastly, 1% of you said a USB charging cable. I guarantee you there's a USB charging cable in the MDF. There always is, because we're in there trying to fix a problem. And while we're in there, hey, can we charge up for a little bit? But that really is not what would most likely be in an MDF. As we've already said, the database server is the thing that is most likely and almost always in that MDF. And that is the answer that we were looking for. 43% of you got that one absolutely correct. Well done. Well, as you can tell, there is a lot of information you need to know on this Network Plus exam. And before we go back to our next question, let me remind you that we have 87 Network Plus videos. Our entire library of Network Plus training videos is available for you to watch at any time on our YouTube channel. But sometimes you may not have time to go through 87 separate videos, 12 hours of content to be able to work through this. So you might want to use our course notes. Our course notes are a consolidated set of all of the information that is contained in these videos. So here's a copy of the PDF version, the digital edition of these course notes, and you can see that they are separated out by individual videos in the same order as the exam objectives. They cover all of the text that's in the video. You've got all of the important graphics, all of the important tables, everything that you need to grab that is important in that video, I have put into this single document. It is my set of course notes that's available in that digital PDF form. I also have a physical form, a physical edition. Obviously, the physical edition is identical to the digital edition. You can see the screens and the information that we were just looking at on my screen. It's identical to what you see in this printed form. It's just in a printed book, printed in what they call perfect binding. That is this kind that we use for paperback books, and it's in full color. So you get a very nice high quality study guide, all available in something I can print and ship to you, or you can buy it in a digital form and download the PDF right this very second. You can find out more about that at professormesser.com/NPCN. And I'll also let you know if you choose to get the physical edition, because some people like having a physical book, you have access to the digital edition immediately while you're waiting on this to be shipped to you. So you're a winner either way. Go to professormesser.com/NPCN. It's also a great way to support some of the things that we are doing here and keeping this entire crazy experiment running. Thank you so much for your continued support with that. Let's do another question, shall we? We have more here. Next question on our list is this one that asks, I really got crazy with the abbreviations. So this question asks, a technician is walking a MIB to obtain the OIDs. That's how you say it. Which of the following would best describe this process? Is this centralized access point management, ongoing network monitoring, management of smartphones and tablets, print server administration, or authentication services? Got a few there. Being able to work through it. A technician is walking a MIB to obtain the OIDs. This is a real thing. I am not kidding. Which of the following would best describe this process? Is this centralized access point management, ongoing network monitoring, management of smartphones and tablets, print server administration, or authentication services? It's got to be one of those, right? This is a pretty good one. Not only because it sounds funny, and that's a big highlight for me, but it's something that we use all the time on our network. So we do have to know this one. Make sure you are familiar with these topics. If you think you know the answer, you can go through professormesser.com/QA to lock in your answer. See if you happen to know what this one is. This might be a good one. As always, of course, please no answers in the chat room. Please no hints in the chat room. I'm really not making this up. These are terms we use all the time in networking. We just can't get enough of acronyms. We love the acronyms. In networking, we do a lot of acronyms. I thought we did a lot in security. We probably do a little bit more acronym-ish type things. Acronymistic. Acronym-ish. We do a lot of acronyms. And we seem to create new ones all the time. This is one of those cases where we really do need to know what these are. I really went to extremes on this one a little bit, but they're all interconnected. And once you know them, and that's the whole point. In fact, if you get something wrong, this is great. This is where you should be getting questions wrong. If you get a question wrong, that is a win, because now you know what the answer is, and now you've learned something. So that's my goal here today, is to give you questions that might make you think a little bit about some of these topics. Let's see how you did with this one. The question asks, a technician is walking a MIB to obtain the OIDs. Which of the following would best describe this process? Is it centralized access point management, ongoing network monitoring, management of smartphones and tablets, print server administration, or authentication services? What did you answer on this one? I have not peeked. I don't know what you answered. Let's see what you put down. 50% exactly say the answer is ongoing network monitoring, but 22% of you say the answer is centralized access point management. 16% say it's management of smartphones and tablets. 12% say authentication services. And a mere 1%, we still have that sliver right there at the edge, saying that it is a print server administration process. So the real key here, obviously, is knowing what a MIB is and what an OID is, and being able to figure out what these are. These are all associated with the simple network management protocol. An OID is an object identifier. It does nothing to do with pizza. An OID has to do with these sets of names. In reality, it's a series of numbers that are associated with a particular variable contained within an SNMP MIB, which is a management information base, which is also an odd term to use. It's just it's a database of statistics. A MIB is a database of stats. That's all it is. Anytime you see a switch, you see a router, you see a firewall, you see a Windows server, you see almost every device connected to the network, at least in the main part of the infrastructure. All of those devices are there. If it's a router, it's routing. If it's a switch, it's switching. If it's a firewall, it's firewalling. It's doing its primary task. It's proxy, it's proxying. But also, while it's doing all of those things, it is going through the process of calculating and accumulating statistics about the information that it is seeing. And because it's gathering those statistics, we can use that information, especially from a network management perspective. So whenever we are using a network management front end, some type of management console, we would query these devices using the SNMP protocol, and we would specify a very particular OID, object ID, that is located in the management information base for that device. And the management information bases can be very different between these devices. For example, the statistics gathered by a firewall might be very different than the statistics that are gathered by a router, and therefore they have their own MIBs. They have their own database of information that you can gather from. And just as an aside, there is also a standard set of MIBs that almost every device can use called MIB2. If you ever see MIB II. So it's that MIB with that particular Roman notation associated with it. So the Roman numerals, the variables that are there, the MIB2 is something that we would be able to see. This is the front end of a MIB walker. This is one that I had on my system. I wonder if I still have this here. I could show it to you live. I do have a number of MIB, quote unquote, MIB walkers on my computer. I didn't plan for this, but since we're here, since we're having fun, since I'm trying to do this in real time, I've got a MIB browser. We're going to see if it pops up on my screen. I don't know. What IP address did I use here? 10.1.10.251. I don't know if that's really still a valid one. Let's try our router, though, which we know is 192.168.1.99. I'm going to bring this up on my screen. This is a product. This is a technology, a piece of software that is simply called MIB Browser. So I'm on Mac OS, but there's plenty of MIB browsers available for other systems. This is just an older one I just happen to have here. Not even sure it works, but we're going to just put in an IP address of a device that's on our network. I'm going to tell it to fetch that information. It doesn't look like that router is set up for that one. I wonder if I have another one. How about 10.1.10.1, which I think is the same one? We're going to have to find an IP address on my network that is actually here and available. So in our after show, let's see if we can find an IP address, and we're going to walk a MIB on a device so that you can get a feel for what that is. I think that might be fun to go through. If I was thinking ahead, we'd have done that already. So this is why the answer is indeed ongoing network monitoring. That's what Simple Network Management Protocol provides to us. It allows us to constantly monitor and watch the statistics that are being accumulated on those separate remote network devices. And that's how we're able to monitor the availability and health of a switch, of a router, of a server, of a firewall, of a proxy, or anything else that might be on your network. It is through SNMP by accessing the OID that is specific to a MIB. There you go. So it sounds funny. It's a weird set of terms that we would use for this, but it's a set of terms we use all the time. Very often when you're bringing in a new piece of equipment, the person managing your SNMP device will say, do you have the MIB for that new device? I need the MIB because it's a device we've never used before. So it has its own special set of variables that it's collecting. And that definition of those variables is contained within the MIB. And then I'll add the MIB to our monitoring station. And now it will be able to manage that device using that product's specific proprietary OIDs. See how all that works together? And so in this case, the answer is indeed being able to have 50% of you ongoing network monitoring. That's exactly what you would work through, the answer that we were looking for. 22% said centralized access point management. There are ways to manage your access points centrally using a set of management front ends for wireless networks. In fact, access point management usually has its own management front end. It does not use SNMP to manage those devices. It usually is some type of proprietary method. And of course, you have here the MIB and OIDs, that means SNMP. So it would not be an access point management function. 16% of you say management of smartphones and tablets. You're probably using a mobile device manager for that. Again, we're not using SNMP to be able to manage smartphones and tablets. Those are much more complex devices that require a much more complex management solution. And then we have 12% that said authentication services. That would usually be done through Radius, through Kerberos, through LDAP, through TACAX, or some other type of management front end. It would not be using MIBs or OIDs. Those have nothing to do with authentication services. And lastly, 1% of you say print server administration. Print servers usually have their own process for managing those devices, usually through the operating system that is being used. And in this particular case, since we're talking about MIBs and we're talking about OIDs, we know it's SNMP and therefore would not be print server administration. The answer here, the one that is the best description of what we were looking for, was the 50% of you that did indeed say ongoing network monitoring. That was the answer that indeed we were looking for. If you are watching this video for continuing education unit credit, I would love to send you an email that qualifies, says that you are here and you qualify for a 1 hour of a webinar category CEU. The way that you would earn that email is you follow these instructions. Make sure you follow these instructions. They are part of the process of earning the CEU. Go to the top or the bottom of the Professor Messer website, click the Contact Us link. In the form that comes up, please put in your name, your email address. In the subject line, please put August 2025 Network Plus. And in the body of the message on a line by itself, put the super secret code words of the month: MIB, OID, SNMP. All three of those words, all three of those acronyms, MIB, OID, SNMP, are the super secret code words of the month. You can just send that to me directly if you want to put any other information in there, or tell me a little bit about what you're working on and what you're going through as you're working to get that Network Plus certification. I love reading the stories that you send. I go through every single one of these and I read all of them. So I'm not able to necessarily respond back directly because we get hundreds of these requests, but it does let me know that we are doing this for a good reason. It's something that kind of keeps me motivated. So I appreciate you guys sending that, but you don't have to. Just go to the top or the bottom of my website, click the Contact Us link, put in your name, your email address, put in the subject line August 2025 Network Plus, and in the body of the message on a line by itself, put the words MIB, OID, SNMP, and just hit the send button. You don't have to make it difficult, and I will receive it, and I'll usually get these back to you. Usually takes about a week or so, sometimes a little bit faster, sometimes a little bit slower, but I get there eventually. Do not worry. I will eventually get that email off to you so that you can find what that is. I know it's the top of the hour, but let's do another question, shall we? I feel like we should do another one. I feel like I've been talking a lot on this one, and we can squeeze another question. Yes, I have been talking a lot. The question that I have for you is this one that asks, all new employees are granted access to the company intranet when they are added to the employee AD group. Which of the following would describe this security control? Would this be least privilege, data at rest, role-based access control, self-signed certificate, or digital signature? Got a few to choose from. If you think you know the answer, go to the link on your screen, professormesser.com/QA, to lock in your answer. Please no answers in the chat room. Please no hints in the chat room. The question again asks, all new employees are granted access to the company intranet when they are added to the employee AD group. Which of the following would describe this security control? Is this least privilege, data at rest, role-based access control, self-signed certificate, or digital signature? Lock in your answer now by visiting the website, professormesser.com/QA. Lock it in at the link you see on your screen, professormesser.com/QA. And as I mentioned before, if you're watching this in the replay, obviously that link is not available, which means you need to be here for our live events. You can always find out when the next live event is going to be by visiting our calendar at professormesser.com/calendar, or if you're in our Discord, it is in the events channel of our Discord, and you'll know exactly when the next live event might be. Let's see how you did on this one. A number of you have locked in your answers already, so I think we could venture a look to see how you made out. The question again asks, all new employees are granted access to the company intranet when they are added to the employee AD group. Which of the following would describe this security control? Is this least privilege, data at rest, role-based access control, self-signed certificate, or digital signature? Let's close the poll and see how you did with this one. Big number, 83% of you say the answer is role-based access control. And then we have 13% that say least privilege, and then it's down to almost nothing. 2% say it's self-signed cert. 2% of you say it's a digital signature. 1% say it's data at rest. So I would say a three-way tie for third place there. The one that by far led the group was the role-based access control, and indeed, it's hard to argue with 83%. That's a pretty big number to be able to work through. A role-based access control is not where you are taking an individual user and very generically, or in this case, very specifically, giving that single user individual rights and permissions. You could probably do that if you had 2 or 3 people at your company. But what if you had 50 people? What if there are 100 people that you need to manage? What if there are thousands of people in your organization? You don't have time to go to everybody's individual login and set individual rights and permissions for every single person. That would not be very practical. It doesn't scale. And in fact, it's very insecure to do it that way because there's too many chances that you could give too much control to someone. Instead, you want to set up the controls to be based on what people do. So it would be the role that they play within the organization. So for example, you have managers, you have directors, you have vice presidents, you have project managers, you have technicians. There are people doing different things in different departments. Well, you could create in the world of Active Directory and in most operating systems, you can create a group. This group would be called managers. It would be the director group. It would be the project manager group. And you would assign permissions to the group. So if you're a project manager, these are the rights and permissions that you normally would have. If you're a manager, a different set of rights and permissions, but they are very common for managers. And for people that are team leads, maybe it's a different set of permissions and rights that you would get. Once you have created the group and you've assigned permissions to the group, you simply add users to the group as they are needed. So as you hire a project manager, you just add them to the project manager group. Boom, they suddenly have all the rights and permissions they need to be able to do all the project management things associated with that particular group. So in reality, you're probably assigning people to multiple groups. They probably are added to the employee group. They're added to the project manager group. Maybe you have different groups depending on what time of the day they work. So if you're part of the day shift, you're on the day shift group. If you're on the midnight shift, you're on the midnight shift group. If you have access to the VPN, maybe we add you to the VPN group. So you can see how easy it is to simply add people to a group to give them the rights and permissions that they need. We refer to that process as a role-based access control. And in Active Directory, you'll find that you're creating and modifying and changing groups all the time. Very, very common to be able to work through that. And that's why 83% of you said, yep, it is a role-based access control. That is indeed what we were talking about when we were trying to set up a group within Active Directory. And if you're anybody who's working through the process of using Active Directory, you'll be doing this quite a bit. 13% of you said the answer was least privilege. Although the employee AD group did give people access to the intranet, that's all it really says. It doesn't say that it gives them a minimum amount of access. It doesn't even say that this is even required for their job. It's just that if you're an employee, you have access to the intranet. That's not really a least privilege quite yet, at least not in that scenario. Least privilege is a form of access where we're giving people only what they need to be able to perform their job and nothing more. If you've ever worked somewhere where everybody had administrator access, not only is from a security perspective, that's painful to even think about. But if you've ever been in that scenario, you know that everybody now has access to all of the data that everybody has on the network. Not a great idea. First, it's not a great idea to give everyone access to everything. That probably is not a good idea from a keeping information private. But it's also a bad idea if some type of malware or an attacker arrives on the network and simply gains access to one single account. Now they have access to everything. So that's a very good example of why a least privilege is a very important thing. If an attacker somehow gains access to an account, but that account doesn't have very much access to anything else, we're at least limiting the scope of that particular attack. So that is why we tend to focus on least privileges being a very important consideration, especially when we get into the world of assigning rights and permissions and security on our network. Then we got into single digits here. 2% of you said digital signature. A digital signature is something you would add to a document, an object, a device, or something else that you would usually it's associated with emails. We're sending and digitally signing this email. That way, when you receive it, you know it really came from me and that nobody changed that message somewhere along the way. That's one of the very many different benefits that you can have by using digital signatures. A self-signed certificate is a certificate that you would create yourself and sign with your own certificate authority. Usually you would have this within your own network infrastructure, and that self-signed certificate is used to identify, validate, or in some other way, I know what that particular device does. You can confirm that that device is part of the devices you have on your network because you've created a certificate and you've signed it and you've added it to that device so you can trust that device. 1% said data at rest. That describes a state of data. That particular state is when we are saving data to a storage drive, to a hard drive, to an SSD, to a backup tape. That is data at rest. We're not currently using that data. It's not in the memory of our system. It's not being transmitted across the network. It is simply sitting on that storage device. We refer to that as data at rest, which of course has nothing to do with assigning access to a particular Active Directory group. In this case, the answer that we were looking for is indeed the one that 83% of you chose, a role-based access control. That is the answer that we were hoping for. And if you answered that, you got it absolutely right. All of the questions that we talked about, all of the individual answers that you saw, all of the acronyms that we went through are all part of the official CompTIA N10-009 exam objectives. This is a free document that you can get directly from the CompTIA website. You simply go to the Network Plus section on the website. There will be a link there for resources, and from there you can download the latest set of exam objectives. These objectives are valuable. They list out for you everything you need to know to be able to pass this exam. I mean everything. This is a copy of the exam objectives, and you can see that it gives you a bulleted breakdown of everything in every domain and every subdomain that make up every topic you need to know for the exam. So there's another 2 pages. There's another 2 pages. Here's another 2 pages. We just keep going. And then finally, we're in section 5 already, all the commands, and there's even an acronym list right at the end. So if you're looking for a comprehensive overview, actually a detailed, comprehensive details of everything you know at a bullet by bullet by bullet breakdown for this exam, this is the document for you, to the point that if you know everything in this document, you are easily going to pass your Network Plus exam. That's how close CompTIA sticks to this document nearly 100% of the time on these exams. So a very important document for you to use prior to starting your studies, probably just as important a document to use prior to scheduling your exam, because this will tell you, did you study everything? Do you know everything you need to know? Which is one of the most popular questions we get on our website. How do I know when I'm ready to take my exam? Have you gone through the exam objectives? Have you checked off every single one of these bullets? Do you know everything listed in here? If you do, you're ready for your exam. We do one of these study groups every month. We'd love for you to come back and join us next month. Currently, this is the schedule for September. For those of you that were in our Network Plus study group for last month, I had this as the normal day for our study group this month. In fact, we're doing it live right now, so we must be doing it, except I pushed it to later in the month, and then I moved it back. So these times and dates can sometimes change. And so I always tell you, if you want to know when the latest set of dates are, go to the link on your screen, professormesser.com/calendar. If you do that now, you'll see that our next Network Plus study group is in September, on September the 17th. But it might not be. It might change. My schedule is very fluid. It's very chaotic right now. So I may tend to change these things around. Currently, we have our Network Plus study group for August scheduled for next week at this very same time and date, Wednesday at noon. So far that's still on the calendar, but September looks like it might change. But right now, this is what September looks like. If I do change it, I change it immediately on the link you see right here. So professormesser.com/calendar always has the latest link. I also duplicate that link on my events channel on our Discord. So either one of those will always have the latest set of calendar and event notifications. Make sure you keep that in mind so you know exactly what's going on. Well, we're done with the part where I ask you the questions, but we're not done yet. Now we have our after show where you ask me the questions. So I look forward to seeing those in just a moment. Stay right where you are. We will pick up with that in just a moment, and I will start going through the questions that you have submitted to me. In the meantime, if you want to find out about our course notes, our downloadable courses, or anything else related to Network Plus, you can find it at professormesser.com/netsuccess. Don't forget about our discounted vouchers if you are in the U.S., Canada, or a U.S. territory. I see a Mariana Islands. I see a Guam. You'll find that. If you're on Puerto Rico, you'll find it at professormesser.com/vouchers. So if you're also meandering around the internet and you'd like to join a lot of other people who are also studying for their Network Plus exam, you can find it over on our Discord. Simply join us at professormesser.com/discord, along with the other social media links that you can find in the upper right of our website at professormesser.com. Well, that brings us to the end of our first hour, but we have plenty more to go through. I have all your questions coming up. Anything you'd like to ask, now's your time to do it. We'll go through those in just a moment in our after show. Thank you so much for joining us in this first hour, and we will see you next time on the Network Plus Study Group. Okay. You know, there are those people out there who will refer to an object identifier as an OID, and I really think they're missing out. It is much more fun to call it an OID, and we really do call it an OID. This kind of goes back to my days working as a systems engineer at Network General, a company that was acquired by NetScout, but we did tons of network management, tons of packet captures, protocol analysis, reporting, just a lot of work on the management side of networking, and lots of fun. Just fantastic to be able to do that. But it is one where we just have funny terms that we use, and we use OID all the time. It's a very common way to describe an object identifier. So it is a real term. We do really call it that. It really is pronounced that way. But if you don't like calling it an OID, call it an OID. Perfectly acceptable to call it that as well. There's no right or wrong way to describe these terms that we use. A lot of people will send me messages. I use, whenever I refer to Linux and the services that run in Linux, I refer to those as daemons because that's what they are. Some people refer to them as daemons because they are pronouncing it the way that it is spelled with that old English form of spelling demon. As it turns out, both are fine. You don't really have to send me an email saying I'm saying it right or saying it wrong. It's in this business, in this industry that we work in, we aren't really at that level where we have to be quite so pedantic. We are completely fine calling it OID or calling it OID, and nobody cares. We really, whatever you want to call it's fine with me. And that, in fact, most of us are completely that way. We got other stuff to worry about. And the pronunciation of some of these terms, which aren't really real words anyway, we're all making it up. There's no word called oid. So it's funny to argue about words that don't make any sense. There's really no point to that. It's kind of odd. It's just kind of an odd thing that we run into in our industry and working through that. In the meantime, though, enough about oids and enough about us. Let's talk about the things that we are going to do in this second hour. This is the after show, everybody. And in the after show, I like to answer your questions. The way that you do that is to go to the link that we've been using already. Go to professormesser.com/QA, and you'll be able to answer or be able to ask these questions. You can submit them really at any time. I will be glad to discuss them at any time. Here we go. You can submit them. They're going to come back here and go through the list of all of these. They're going to be put into my database on this side, and I will sift through them and put them on the screen in front of you. We'll just step through over and over and over. We've got Ravala in the chat room. I was told off for saying data instead of data. Don't you love people? It's the same thing. It's exactly the same thing. So is it defense or defense? Now, we could do this forever. We could just keep going through the list, right? So that's why it doesn't matter. And someone who is really that wrapped up into the world of what things are said, what they are called, probably just need to redirect a little bit. It's not really that super important. Let's go through the questions that you have submitted to me. We've got a few to work through. So here's the one. We've got, for example, earlier in our study group, we talked about an SC connector. Let me go back. One moment, please. Sorry, I went off mic there a little bit. Let's go back to that SC connector. So remember when we talked about SC way back when? There it is. So here's our SC connector. Pretty. These are nice connectors. They're not that big in real life. See, there's the size of my head. No, they're standard fiber optic connectors that we would work with and be able to have here. So these fiber optic connectors are commonly used for really any type of network connection. You can use them for anything. You can plug them in and connect many different devices together wherever they happen to be. I use fiber within my studio, but my studio, it's literally a desk. You can't see much because my head's there, but see if we can get, so there you go. So here's the configuration here at my desk, but I have some equipment that's in here I connect together with fiber, mostly because it's just something that's convenient and it helps me demonstrate some capabilities. Maybe you've got an SFP. So I've got something you can plug in on the fiber connections. That happen to be a copper SFP, but I've got fiber ones as well that we use. So we use fiber optics in here, but I don't need to. It's the type we have here, the copper connections that we have will run 10 gig just fine here. But the question that came in is, what about connecting the network devices in the same rack? And we use fiber to get very high speeds out of this. Well, you could do that. Absolutely. We have type of fiber connections all the time. In fact, I mentioned when we went through that question that sometimes we will connect devices with fiber if it's in an industrial environment, so we can minimize the chance that some type of radio interference, radio frequency interference, RFI, would be an issue. So we can avoid that by using fiber. Fiber also is very commonly used in environments where there is a security issue. So we want to be sure that no one can bring up some type of inductive probe. This is possible. You can find a network drop and you can get an inductive connection that will wrap around the network cable and be able to listen in on the signal and effectively capture packets without physically breaking that connection. That is possible. You can do that. To avoid that, you get rid of the radio signals. And instead of having radio signals over copper, you have light running over fiber. Well, I can't use an inductive probe on fiber, at least not easily, to be able to do that. So fiber is very commonly used for very highly secure environments, so that you can ensure that no one can easily tap into your connections and listen in to be able to do that. So that's one of those examples. So Sure, you could connect devices in a single rack. Say you needed 40 gig, 100 gig fiber connections. Yeah, we do that in data centers all the time. The question that I posed, of course, was in these 5 scenarios, in which one would be most likely to use for fiber? And I obviously didn't put 40 gig in the same rack, 100 gig in the same rack. Generally, if equipment's in the same rack, we just plug in a couple of Cat5 cables, Cat5, Cat6, something. You plug in whatever you got and you're connected and you're fine. So in those 5 options I gave you, the one that best fit was the one that was going to an extended distance, obviously fiber optics, and that's the whole point of that SC connection. So hopefully that gave you a little bit more clarity with, can't we use fiber in the rack? Yes. Well, the question wasn't about what you could do. It was about, in these 5 scenarios, which one are you doing? So yes, you can absolutely use fiber in the rack, and we use fiber in our racks all the time, even to connect devices in the same rack, but usually it is a very specialized reason for that. And you gave a very good example of something that was a specialized reason. High bandwidth, multiple connections across those, very, very common to see. Let's keep going through our list. There's quite a bit to choose from. Some of your questions are spot on with some of the things that many of you are thinking about. If you do have a question about networking, about certifications, about IT, or really about anything, you're welcome to submit those. Go to professormesser.com/QA to submit your question, and it will just show up in my list over here. So let's keep going through this list of things. Let's talk about what Chuck has to say. Chuck says, I need to be certified by the end of the year. Well, this is good. Already this is pretty good because we're in August. So if you need to be certified by the end of the calendar year, pardon me, I think we're in good shape. Chuck, however, says, I'm feeling a bit down and defeated. No, what's going on, Chuck? Chuck says, I took the course, feel like I understand it relatively well, but I only get 65% or so on the practice tests. I'm overwhelmed by all the acronyms, port numbers, and especially subnetting. So let's kind of break this down a little bit and give Chuck some ideas on things you can do to make this process go a little bit smoother for you. I often refer to this study process as the WRAP method, that to optimize your studying, you need to WRAP, W-R-A-P. You need to watch a good video course so you can see people performing these functions, demonstrating these capabilities like we do. So that is the W in WRAP, is watching the videos. You need to make sure you get a good book. Read. The R in WRAP is you need to read a good book. And maybe it's more than one book. If one book is not really working for you, and I've run into this, especially with things like Network Plus and Security Plus. If you've gone through a Network Plus book, and that Network Plus book doesn't really work, you aren't feeling it, it's not getting into your brain, maybe it's just a bad book for you. It's not maybe a bad book for other people, but for you, maybe that book is not speaking to you. You need a book that's better designed for the way you like to learn. So maybe a different book would be an option. So find one that's a little bit different. I tell people all the time, don't buy a book until you go out to Amazon, you look through all of the different Network Plus books that they have, and then you read through a number of them. They have that option on Amazon, obviously, to look inside. You can read the first chapter or read a section of the book. Read a section of the book and see if you like it. See if you like the style. See if you like the tone. Some books are trying or work to be kind of entertaining, so they might have a little bit more of a casual style about them. Some books are very by the book, if you will. They are very straightforward, and here's what you need to do. Some people work better with that type of front end. They don't need a lot of fluff. They just want to know what they need to know. But that's different depending on who you are. One book might appeal to one person, another book might appeal to someone else. So I don't have an answer for you on what book is the best, because you need to make that decision. And so I recommend that the R in WRAP, make sure you read a good book or multiple books to be able to do that. Then once you go through that process, it'd be useful to go through maybe some labs. You want to apply what you have learned. That is the A in WRAP. maybe get a good lab, maybe sit at a command prompt, do some of the pings, some of the IP configs, all of those commands that we have in our videos. You can follow along with me to perform NS lookups, to do a dig, to do a ping, to go through a trace route. You can follow along and do all of that yourself by applying it right there at the command line. We also have other labs available on our site that you might want to look into for Network Plus. And lastly is the P. We need to practice and see if we really know what we have learned. We need practice exams. And of course, I provide some of those options for those on my site. Some of the books that you have practice tests and practice questions in those as well. There's lots of places you can go to get practice information. You need to make sure you get good ones if you're going to work through that. And that is the P. So you may not need all of those. WRAP is a guideline. And for some people, they may only need 3 of those or 2 of those. Some people only watch the videos and they're done. Sometimes that depends on what your knowledge coming into this is. Having a foundational knowledge can sometimes help and speed up the process. But if you're like Chuck is, going through this over and over and it's just not clicking, you need to maybe change what you're using for studying. Not everybody studies the same way. And if you're simply trying to emulate what other people are doing, you might be doing it wrong for you. Find the study method that works best for you. A tip that I will give you, Chuck, thanks for putting this at the end where you said, I'm overwhelmed by all the acronyms, port numbers, and especially subnetting. So first, let me break this down. You don't have to go through and memorize acronyms. What? What did I say? You do not need to go through the process of memorizing acronyms, at least not at a literal level. This is the acronym pages from the official CompTIA exam objectives. All it gives you is the acronym, and as they call it here, spelled out. So, for example, API stands for Application Programming Interface. Just knowing those 2 things, worthless. Doesn't help you. Doesn't solve a problem. Doesn't explain what it is. It doesn't help you with a question. It doesn't solve any of your performance-based questions. Doesn't help you at all. Knowing that might be useful in other context, but just knowing the letters and just knowing how it is spelled out is not enough. You have to understand what API stands for, but then you also have to know, what is this used for? How is this technology applied in the real world? So don't just generically step through this. API means Application Programming Interface. API-PA means Automatic Private Internet Protocol Addressing. ARP means Address Resolution Protocol. You could go through this entire list and memorize all of these, and it's not going to help you that much. In reality, most of these abbreviations, most of these acronyms are going to appear naturally, organically through your study process. Let me give you an example. We're just going to go back randomly to section 3.1. We'll just choose this. Explain the purpose of organizational processes and procedures. Notice that within the exam objectives themselves, they talk about IP address management, and they're nice enough to put IPAM right next to it. They talk about service level agreement, and right next to it, they put SLA. End of life is EOL. End of support is EOS. Operating system is OS. So you're going to get the acronyms naturally as you go through this process. And I think all the acronyms that you need to know are the acronyms that are in this very formalized list of exam objectives. I would not even necessarily spend a lot of time over here on this acronym list. I just wouldn't do it. It's really full of information that doesn't really apply directly to many of these exam objectives. And if it does apply to an exam objectives, it's already abbreviated right here in the exam objectives themselves. So this is the best way to learn the objectives and learn not only the objectives, but the acronyms. You learn them together. And I think it sticks better in your brain. And I think you're not spending your time doing rote memorization. There is nothing worse than rote memorization. And there is quite a bit of rote memorization on this exam. I'll give you an example where rote memorization is important. It's about another topic that Big Chuck talked about. Get the name right. For example, section 1.4 is a list of the ports, protocol, services, and traffic types. They list out for you every port number you need to know. How many are here? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20, 21, 22, 23, 24. 24 of them. Not too overwhelming. That is one of the few times where you really do need to know what these are, and you need to understand, not just file transfer protocol is FTP, FTP is port 20 and 21. You need to understand what that does for you. So again, we have to extend these definitions a bit to really make it useful, but this is one of those times where a flashcard might help you. Being able to break these down and understand. Maybe it's a drag and drop game. Maybe it's one where we take the name and then we tell you what it does. Maybe we don't even memorize the port number yet. We just memorize what does that do for us. What is SMB? Why is that important? Server message block doesn't tell me what it does. Doesn't tell me where we will see it. Doesn't tell me what use it is for us. Once you know what it is, then we can maybe apply some of those port numbers. Some of these you might know already. Some of you might already know that web traffic that is non-encrypted uses port 80. And you know that encrypted web traffic over SSL, really TLS, work with me people, SSL uses port 443. So there might be port numbers you just already know. And you can work through all of those as you are going through the process of studying this. But that is one time where rote memorization might be a little bit useful. But there's only 24 of them, so not overwhelming. And lastly, this is such a good question, Chuck. You talked about being overwhelmed by subnetting. That is one topic you should never, never, never be overwhelmed by. And here's why. Let's find where subnetting is talked about in the exam objectives. I'm going to go over to section 1.7, which says this is out of domain 1. And by the way, when we look at domain 1, everything in domain 1 is 23%. That is networking concepts is that domain. That is 23% of your exam will be topics directly taken from domain 1. So everything in the OSI model, everything dealing with appliances, routers, switches, firewall. I'm sorry, I'm bouncing around. Routers, switches, firewalls, IPS, NAS, TTL, everything associated with cloud concepts and connectivity options, software as a service, platform as a service, elasticity, multi-tenancy. We have all of our port numbers are also in section 1. We have to know all the port numbers, what those protocols do. We have to understand wireless technologies, wired technologies, transceivers, connector types. We want to understand network topologies, meshes, hybrids, 3-tier, collapsed core, traffic flows. And then we, of course, have IP addressing. Also, section 1.8 deals with SDN, VXLAN, zero trust, infrastructure as code, IPv6. All of that is just 23% of the exam. And inside of that section 1 is section 1.7, which is given a scenario, use appropriate IPv4 network addressing. This covers public addresses, private addresses, RFC 1918, those private addresses, loopback localhost information, the different classes of addresses, which are important to know when you need a starting point for subnetting. But the only place where they even talk about subnets is right here. Subnetting. Variable length subnet mask, VLSM, and classless interdomain routing, CIDR. Those are the only two mentions of anything that you could probably really consider to be a relatively complex subnetting question. That's it. Which means of the 23% of your exam, how many subnetting questions do you think you're going to get? 1? 2? Maybe 3. Maybe. I mean, the random number generator can be harsh sometimes, but maybe you get 3 maybe you get 3 questions. That would be unusual. People have disclosed to me, indeed, they're violating their candidate agreement by saying this, but people have said to me after their Network Plus exam, I didn't get any subnetting questions. I got 0. Well, statistically, that's certainly possible. Probably not even unusual. So if you are someone who is really struggling with subnetting, you can't get the math, you've spent hours on it, you've tried to do the binary part, you've tried to use some type of a faster method to get through it. You got the magic number method, that didn't stick for you. You tried my 7-second subnetting method, that didn't stick. You tried the one where you're right on your knuckles, and people do crazy things for subnetting. So when people say, I just can't get subnetting, I'm struggling with subnetting. It's making me sad. The subnetting is making me sad. I tell people, well, don't do it. What? What? Don't. It's on the list of exam objectives, Professor Messer. Why would you tell me not to do something on the exam objectives? Because if you're spending all of your time, you're spending days and days and days and days of your time on one topic, then you are neglecting other topics, which would be much more likely to be asked of you on the exam. This is not about what you need to know or not know. This is about time management and being able to understand everything necessary to pass this exam. And if you can instead learn 2 other topics that will be presented to you on the exam that you can get right versus the one question you get about subnetting, I'll take that. I'm fine sacrificing the subnetting questions if you get other questions correct. Now, I'm not saying you don't need to know subnetting, because you absolutely need to know subnetting. Subnetting is a huge part of networking. Eventually, I know it's hard to understand now, but this is true. Trust me when I tell you this. Eventually, you will be able to subnet in your head, or at least to a degree where if somebody said, here's my network address, here's my subnet mask or CIDR block notation, and I need to calculate out a subnet or calculation on this, or they give you a default gateway where you're thinking, wait, did you give me a default gateway that's not in the same subnet as the IP address and subnet mask? You need to be able to calculate that very quickly or relatively quickly. You don't have to do it immediately, but you may have to think in your head, well, let's see, that's not on the same subnet. I don't think those are on the same subnet, are they? So that's one of those scenarios where it's useful to be able to calculate this on the fly. And what you will find is after a while, you will start to recognize patterns with certain subnets. I know, this is what networking people, this is what we do. So for example, I used to manage a /26 network. I used to manage 165.245.0.0/26. So it's not 24, it's not 28, it's 26. The subnet mask, 255.255.255.192. There, I spelled it out for you. So I can, in my head, I already know where those networks start and end because I've memorized them at this point. I worked with that network for years. Therefore, I already know where the starting and ending points are. It's just automatic in my brain now. So it will get that way for you as well. I promise. Most people describe subnetting as one of these topics where they didn't get it, they didn't get it, they didn't get it. Bing! Suddenly a light goes on. There's the sound of angels. There's harp music playing. And you go, oh, I see the pattern. I get it now. We're simply taking a pizza and we're cutting it into smaller pizza slices. That's all we're doing with subnetting. And once you start to break it out at that level and you do it enough that it becomes common, it suddenly becomes something that made you sad, suddenly now becomes something that's just incredibly simple. But for the Network Plus exam, if this is a stumbling block for you, if this is a mental block for you, get rid of the mental block. Throw it out. Don't need it. There it goes. No more subnetting. There you go. Study everything else. It's not a chance. We're not telling you to slack off on your exam. We're not telling you you don't need to do something. If you don't learn subnetting, work even harder to learn the other parts. And it ultimately is work out okay for you. I think I'm okay giving you that advice. Now, ideally, I want you to learn subnetting. I think it's valuable to use not only in your networking today, but you will use subnetting throughout your entire career. Everything will start to make more sense. You'll start to understand how networks are connected. It really is an important part of understanding IP version 4 and the way we connect networks and design networks today, but you don't have to dwell on it for the purposes of this exam. That is some relatively unusual advice, but I think it's worthwhile to consider if you're someone who just cannot get through the subnetting part. I really think you should really work on it though. Once you start doing it and it works and you figure it out, it's really a lot of fun. It really is. So although it seems along with this other large pile of things that you are working on, that this is almost overwhelming, you're not wrong. It is almost overwhelming. Let me qualify your feelings here. You're absolutely right. There's tons of acronyms in this. There's lots of topics that you need to know. There's lots of nuanced, detailed pieces of information that you need to memorize for this, but don't let it get you down because you just take it a bite at a time. Just take it a chunk at a time. Don't just try to learn as much as you can in one sitting. Say that today we're just going to follow, I want to learn these topics. Pick 3 things. I want to learn, in fact, let's do this right now. Let's go through our, let's do 1.3. So right here. So in section 1.3, there's a lot of topics in section 1.3. There's a lot. This is all the cloud topics. So network functions virtualization, NFV, virtual private cloud, VPC, network security groups, network security lists. Okay, there's 4. For the purposes of your learning and the purposes of your sitting down and learning something, those are the only 4 things I want you to learn. And you'll, bite off whatever piece of this makes sense for you. Maybe you only have 10 minutes. We're just going to learn 1 thing. Maybe you have an hour. We're going to learn 4 things. Let's just take these 4. The rest of the exam does not exist. Only deal with those 4 topics. Go through those 4 things. So watch the first section of that video or watch just that video that describes those topics. That's all you should be doing. This should not be something overwhelming. The exam will be there when you're done. For most of us, there are no time frames associated with this, although we've already seen today that people have commented, Big Chuck says, I need to have this done by the end of the year. Okay, a clock is ticking there, but you got plenty of time. We're here in August, September, October, November. You got 4 months. You got plenty, and you've already been working on this. This is absolutely doable. Your numbers on your exams that you have taken, 65%, that's a very solid showing for your first set of practice exams. It's not passing, we get it, but it's not something you should be worried about. This is the process. You need to get things wrong on these exams so that you can learn what is right. So don't worry that you aren't getting it or that you're answering questions wrong. Just make sure when you get a question wrong, dive into the answer. Don't just, I got it wrong. Next question. Well, you're missing an opportunity. When you get a question wrong, it's a chance. It's an opportunity for you to learn something new. It's a chance for you to really drive into this and answer 2 different questions. Why did I answer that one with the wrong answer? And secondly, why didn't I answer the one with the right answer? And once you get both of those, you will be able to kind of compare and contrast those things together. So this might be a good opportunity for you to consider the tools that you're using for training, consider the individual topics that you are training yourself upon, and then consider the process that you are using. All of those should work together. So I think that gives first a great question from Chuck. Thank you for sending it in. I kind of talked a lot to that one, but I think that is a very good example of how everybody studies differently. Everybody approaches this content differently. And everybody needs to think about how they can customize their own training process to work best for them as an individual. Let's go through some more questions that you have. A lot of great questions that have been submitted. Some of you have submitted comments in here. I'm obviously not putting those up on the screen, but thank you so much for submitting the comments that you put in there at professormesser.com/QA. I see them. I thank you for putting them in there. Very nice to have those in there as well. We appreciate that. I will also share some of those with the team here as well so that we see all of those. Let's keep going through this list. This is a common question. This is one from Eric, and it applies kind of to a large number of these exams that we're dealing with right now. This is from Eric, who says, is this an okay of viewing IaaS, PaaS, SaaS, that is the infrastructure platform and software as a service? And of course, there are other as a services here as well. This is something, when you first get into the world of cloud computing, this is kind of weird how suddenly everything that was in one computer, one device that I can physically touch, we've taken it and cut it up into tiny little pieces and we've spread it out across the internet so that things that used to be all on one system are now virtualized in the cloud pieces where storage is over here and CPU is over there and the networking does something different and different people might be responsible for different aspects of this. It is a very different way to think about computing. It's a very different way to think about how we manage our infrastructure. And indeed, this is one that you will run into on your exam because they are part of the exam objectives. So how do you really piece this together? How do you tell what this is? There is a section, it's not in the Network Plus exam objectives, but it is in the Security Plus exam objectives, where they expect you to understand the responsibilities associated with these different aspects of a system. A responsibility matrix, we tend to call it in the industry. And I think I put a responsibility matrix into our document, into the course here. This is section 1.3. So I'm going to hunt it down on my side for the cloud models, I think is the name of the video this is in. I'm typing, installing on my side because I'm finding the video and hunting it down. And I wonder, this is in my video called Cloud Models in section 1.3. And this is a cloud responsibility matrix. That's what it's called. This is something that is, I took this one, I believe, from either Azure or Amazon's cloud services, but it's a very similar thing. If you go to whatever cloud provider you use, you go to Amazon Web Services, you go to Microsoft Azure, you go to Rackspace Cloud, whatever cloud you're using, and you simply go to their documentation and look for the cloud responsibility matrix, they will have something like this. And it's very similar. There might be slight differences between the different matrices that you will find, but this is something that's very common to see. And I think it helps explain where these different cloud platforms or cloud models fit. And you can see they're separated out into the physical data center, the physical network, the physical hosts. Then we load an operating system on a physical host. We have networks on there. There's applications that we would load. There might be an identity and directory infrastructure like Active Directory or an LDAP database. There might be accounts on top of that, usernames that would log in. Devices themselves like mobile devices and PCs are in this list, and then information and data. So for software as a service, you could see the blue are things that you as the customer would be responsible for. The yellowish color are the things that the provider is responsible for in each one of these different cloud models. So for infrastructure as a service, where effectively all they're giving you is the platform to run on, you're responsible for almost everything else. You can see the provider, in this case, the provider manages the physical data center, they manage the physical network, they manage the physical hosts. And that's it. Here you go. Here's your infrastructure as a service. And you're like, well, where's my operating system? You didn't give me an operating system. They go, sorry, operating system is blue. That's customer managed. I gave you the system you can use to load an operating system on. Go load it. So it's up to you now. Oh, I need to get Windows. I need to get Linux. I need to get Mac OS. I need to get whatever operating system I'm going to use. And I will, as the customer, I'm responsible for installing that. What if you don't want to install that? What if you want somebody else to manage it? Well, then you probably want to use platform as a service or software as a service, because in those scenarios, the provider manages the operating system. So this type of view, this responsibility matrix, is not just useful to know that if you were to get cloud services, here is what you would or would not be responsible for. It actually helps you understand the differences between all of these different service types. So if you're trying to break down what are the real differences between these, that's a pretty good example of understanding where the delineation is with these physical components and virtual components as to what you as the customer would be responsible for or what the cloud provider would be responsible for. I think that might help you as well. Let's keep going through your list of questions. You got some great ones here, by the way. I know we're getting close to the top of the hour, so I want to get through the list of all of those. So we'll have to see how these all break down and see where they happen to be. Other types of monitoring, other questions that you have, or anything you would like to submit, you can at any time at professormesser.com/QA. Let's talk about the industry. Let's talk about what we're doing. Let's talk about this question that describes IPv4 has a limited number of IP addresses. We know about this. Watch the video course. You know that there are a limited number, and that network address translation can help us extend the functionality of IPv4, even though we don't just have a limited number of public IPs, we're out of public IPs. We no longer have public IP addresses that we can simply assign out to people. At this point, we have to carve out IPs from someone else. We have to take IP addresses from other organizations that are hoarding them. Some companies will sell IP address blocks. This can be a money-making endeavor because these are valuable assets now with this IP version 4. Even though there is network address translation, at some point you still need at least one public IP address to be able to communicate on the public internet. That one IP address, if there are no IP addresses in the pool, where are you supposed to get that from? Fortunately, most internet providers have their own set of public IP addresses they will divvy out to you. But within your own organization, you are correct. Network address translation solves a lot of those problems. But of course, network address translation is just a sort of a kludge to get us around this IP address limitation. It is not a security technique. This is one of those examples where you would find. But the question is, since we know there's these problems, we know IPv4 has no more public IP addresses. We know that network address translation introduces a number of limitations with applications being able to communicate with each other. Some applications can't communicate over NAT. If you've ever done anything with voice over IP, you know that NAT is a horrible thing. We have to have some type of application level gateway just to be able to make voice over IP work properly over these NATed networks. NAT translation or network address translation and being able to do NAT traversal becomes very important. It complicates things. It makes things harder. So let's get rid of NAT. One way that we could do that is to simply use IPv6. Problem solved. IPv6 fixes this issue because we no longer need this limit. We no longer have a limited number of public IP addresses. We effectively have as many public IP addresses as we would like to use, and then some. That's how many we have with IPv6. With IPv6, we don't have to do any type of network address translation if we don't want to. Network address translation we often think of as just being something that's a kludge for IPv4 so that we can use these public and private IP addresses. But network address translation is used in many different scenarios to perform many different functions. It's not just about IP addressing. So IPv6, we don't have to use this IP address kludge. We don't have to use network address translation just to be able to directly communicate between point A and point B. And after all, as I mentioned before, NAT is not a security control anyway. So if we got rid of NAT, we'd still have our firewalls. We would still have our security controls. It would work in exactly the same way. So NAT is not somehow protecting us. Many people do believe that it is, but it is not. Otherwise, I often tell people that say, no, NAT is an important security control. Really? How many companies that have been attacked? How many companies that have their data taken? How many companies that have gotten ransomware? How many of them are using NAT? The answer is all of them. Well, it didn't protect them. So why do you think it's protecting you? It doesn't. NAT has nothing to do with security. IPv6 can indeed solve a number of these addressing issues. So the question, again, that I am begging, which is, why aren't we using it then? It makes perfect sense. Why don't we just all go to IPv6? That's what we should do. It solves all these problems. There's integrated encryption. There's solves the problem of IP addresses. It gives us flexibility into the future. It allows us to have many, many subnets that we could set up on a single net. There's so many things we can do with IPv6. But we're not really jumping over to it, are we? If you look at your local computer, it still has an IPv4 address. If you go to practically any organization in the world, it's still running IPv4. The only people really only doing IPv6, and I say only, but they're really, the emphasis is there, are our service providers. They have worked really, really, really hard to implement IPv6, and they've done a phenomenal job. And you could effectively connect any device now on any ISP and run IPv6 natively end to end over the internet, which is fantastic. We can do it today. Why aren't we? Because IPv6 is really hard to figure out if you've never used it before. If you look at an IPv6 address, you see that, what is that number? What is that crazy number on the IPv6 address? Let's see if we can bring up my list that I did earlier today. Sorry, I'm off mic just a little bit. So here, for example, is that question we went through earlier in the study group. And I did my ipconfig command, and you can see the IPv4 address, 192.168.1.98. The IPv6 address is FD1580441-1FC1C45873. And it goes on. I'm halfway through. We're not even done yet. It's this big long number, and it's all in hexadecimal. It's not even in a language I understand. And this is the problem, is that it is a little bit more involved to initially understand what's going on here. You've summed it up perfectly, Justin, in the chat room. IPv6 addresses scare me. They scare everyone. They scare all of us because it's the unknown. This is sort of the problem with humans doing networking or any type of technology, is if we don't know what it is, we're really scared of it. Oh, that looks hard. Oh, it's hexadecimal. What's going on with that? And it's long. It's got all these numbers and look, double colons, and what is happening there? What? I don't even need DHCP anymore? What are you talking about? So there's all this additional knowledge you need to be able to use IPv6. And indeed, there is equipment out there in the world that initially did not exactly implement IPv6 very well. So there was a little bit of a stumbling block as we got going, but we've been doing IPv6 a very long time. I was doing packet captures of IPv6 very early on, just as IPv6 was introduced. And it just never, this was years and years ago, and it just never really caught on. We are seeing a slight move every year to more and more people using IPv6. We are seeing more organizations embrace it. It's very slow. It's very difficult to change what works. IPv4 is working. It is well integrated. It's well implemented. Almost every application understands it. What's driving you to change in that case? So it's because the effort involved in implementing IPv6 has a little bit more of a learning curve than IPv4, that most of the time we tolerate IPv6 enough to maybe get it configured on an interface. But I don't think at that point we stop and say, let's not worry about implementing this in the enterprise as our only form of communication. And indeed, once you get into bigger companies, it becomes a little bit more of a challenge to do this. Imagine a company of 5,000 people. And one day the IT manager comes to you and says, we no longer want to have any IPv4 in our network. We're going to go all IPv6. When a company of 5,000 people, there's bound to be at least one application that doesn't do IPv6 very well, or maybe even at all. And for that one app, that's the app keeping the entire organization from moving solely to IPv6. Is that a problem though? Is it really a problem? Not necessarily. If everything is still working and we have our IP addresses to the internet, our IPv4, as limited as it is, our ISP had one for us, so we have a public IP address. We have private IP addresses on the inside. Our firewalls are able to perform network address translation at wire speeds because we're doing it in the hardware. There's nothing really downside about that. There's no problems with that. It works, and it works extremely well. We'll keep doing IPv4. There's a lot of other reasons behind this, and you can talk politics, and you can talk money, and you can talk infrastructure, and you can talk training. There's a lot of other reasons that we just didn't go into, and I'm sure there's even more things that I haven't even thought of beyond that scope. But it is one of those cases where if it's not broke, we're not going to fix it. Runs just fine. That is a very common thing in the world of networking, by the way. Once you implement it and get it in the network and it works, don't touch that. What are you doing? So let me get this straight. You want to take a network that works perfectly and completely change the underlying infrastructure. Okay. Should I go update my resume? Is that something we want to do? Why would we do that again? Why would we create outages, downtime, problems, support issues, and all of these other issues? We'd be spending all this money, and in the end game, after going through that entire process and the planning and the implementation and the change control and the configuration updates At the end of it, you actually haven't changed anything. There's no change. Physically, functionally, the network works exactly the same. Okay, well, now you can sort of see why we didn't go to IPv6 as a sole networking layer 3 protocol. That's why. So that's the reason. It's not complicated. It's just humans. That's just the way we work. And indeed, that's a pretty good argument. If you say, well, if you took out IPv4 and you put in IPv6, what new fancy thing does this provide? What additional enhancements is this giving me? There's a couple. There's like encryption built in, sort of. You could do that. That's it? Okay, now we know why we didn't do it. We've figured it out. We have gone through the entire process. Now we understand why. So that's my opinion of IPv6. That's sort of the idea of why you see this very capable, very functional, well thought out, now well implemented infrastructure option, this protocol that can solve all these problems. We're not going to use it. We're not putting it in. That's why. It's one of those things. It's one of those scenarios. Maybe one day we'll get there. Will we see that? I don't know. Our children's children will be running IPv6 at some point. It will be a banner day that none of us will be here to see. But in our minds, we know it's a better future. There will be a better tomorrow for our offspring. There you go. IPv6 for my great-great-great-grandchildren. Next on our list, let's bring back ATM, asynchronous transfer mode. That's what we'll do. Token Ring had its day, right? We'll keep going through those paces to work through the details of this. I know we're at the top of the hour. Let's do some more questions, though. We had a couple come in that were pretty good. Such a good question. Robert, who does not say perform the following steps. I need to get back to where I was. There we are. Robert says, Professor, I scored my A+ back in May of this year. Congratulations on your A+, Robert. Robert continues, I am currently working on Network Plus, trying to get my first job in IT. How can I get my foot in the door for IT? This is the hardest part of the process, by the way. If you're looking to get into the industry of information technology, you're looking to become expert in operating systems. You want to work in a data center. You want to work with data. You want to do networking. You're interested in cybersecurity. You want to be able to have some type of understanding, planning, designing, troubleshooting of networks, applications, and data, then you need to get into IT. IT is a big category of jobs. There's a lot of things you can do in IT. It's not just any one thing. It's not just any multiple things. It's a huge, vast number of things that you could choose to do in information technology. The biggest problem, though, is just getting in. Once you're in, it is much easier to bounce around to anything that might interest you in the world of technology. But you have to get that first job. Sometimes people will come into our Discord and they'll say, well, I got offered a job in IT, but I make more bartending. So I'm just going to stay bartending. Like, oh, okay. You have to get that first job in IT. The first job in IT probably does pay less than bartending. Probably does. But what's your top end on the bartending side? How much money will you ever make per year as a bartender? Some bartenders do pretty good. They might do 75 years. Some, maybe in places like New York City, might do 6 figures. You might do $100,000 in bartending if it's a very high-end place and you get tips, and there are people that do extremely well at these high-end restaurants. No question. But that's it. Your top, that's a very small niche of bartenders, by the way. And there's not a lot of those jobs out there. And that's it. You're topped out there. I say topped out. You're topped out at 6 figures. You might think, well, that's pretty good. I'll take 6 figures. But what if you could double that? That's the world of IT. So don't limit yourself at the beginning by immediately saying, I'm not going to go into IT because I don't want to take the hit now. you move up in the world of IT relatively quickly. You move up as fast as you apply yourself. This is one of the benefits of IT as well, is you can be very self-directed and very quickly move up the ranks because you begin to gather knowledge. The more knowledge you gather, the more valuable you become. The more knowledge you gather, the more options you have available in IT. The more knowledge you gather, the more options you have. That's the value of IT, because you could go into operating systems, you can go into server administration, you could talk about networks, you could design networks, you could troubleshoot networks, you could work on cybersecurity topics, you could implement firewalls, you could be able to someone who manages a certificate infrastructure, you could work on the management side, collecting all of the data and doing correlations and reports. It goes on and on and on and on. And those jobs you get to change around depending on what you would like to be able to do. This is a very unique industry, by the way. You cannot do this in transportation. Very, very difficult. Transportation, you drive a truck, you put things on a train, you get things sent across the ocean, and that's the job you do. You can't somehow one day, I'm going to drive a truck, and then the next day you decide, I'm going to drive a boat. No, you can't. No, it doesn't work that way. You can't just drive a truck and then one day go to driving a boat. The ships are very different than the boats. But in the world of IT, you can start with workstation management. You can shift over into server administration. You could pivot there into networking. You could take all that knowledge and apply it into security. There's ways that you can move around inside of IT without having to worry so much about recreating yourself. It is simply an extension of your available knowledge that allows you the option to move into these different areas of IT. Can't do this in medicine. You can't do it in transportation. You can't do it in manufacturing. This is an opportunity. This is one of the great opportunities of IT in my mind, is that flexibility where you can find the right job for you doing the right thing with the right type of technologies. And today, that is a certain combination of things. But 2 years from now, you may have a different set of interests. You may be pivoting to do something else. In my roles in IT, I've worked as field service technicians. I've worked as a help desk at a corporate environment. We called it the service desk. It's a help desk. I worked as a workstation management, Windows workstation management. I moved into server administration from there. That got me interested in networking, which ultimately got me a job working at Network General and doing things with network management and packet captures and understanding how to see all that data. And you're building your knowledge base. In each one of those jobs, I learned amazing amounts of information. From there, now that you've got operating systems, I understood Linux, Unix at the time. I understood Windows. I understood the networking side of things, the protocols, the way they operated. I understand IP and TCP and how they all worked on the network. I understood application layer protocols, took all that knowledge and leveraged it into the world of cybersecurity. So we did IT security work and moved into the world of next generation firewalls, and that took off in its own little thing. These types of decisions and things you can do will only happen if you get your foot in the door. How do you get your foot in the door? Well, that's the hardest part, isn't it? Now, I do have a video. It is in the YouTube video description of this video is a link to a video that is how to get a job in IT with no experience. I don't know if that's the exact title, but it's close enough. You'll see it. And I give you some things you should think about if you are planning a set of strategies to get that first job in IT. And they effectively revolve around 4 different elements. Those elements are, easy one first, industry certifications. You've got your A+, your Network+, your Security+, or something that is similar that an employer is looking for. Different employers look for different things. They probably have a set of certifications that they are looking for. What are they looking for? That's the certification you should get. The other thing that employers really like still these days, for better or worse, is a formal education. A 2-year degree, a 4-year degree. Not necessarily a master's or a PhD, but a bachelor's degree there's a sweet spot there with the bachelor's degree for the amount of time and money you put into it and the value that it gives you on the other side. My bachelor's degree is in business management. No computers there. That's okay. most universities do not have degrees in information technology. They simply do not, and they don't want to. They've already told us, they've already said, we aren't interested in training you. We are a university of higher learning. We teach you. We teach you. We don't train you. We teach. Well, thanks. Thanks for not training me on the things that I'm going to need to know when I get out of here if I'm interested in managing and protecting data, operating systems, networks, and all the security things. They're not going to teach you that. Very few universities do that. I think that's one of the reasons why community colleges are doing so well with technology topics. This is why there are some niche universities, private universities, and those types that are doing very well on the IT side because nobody else is teaching it. So difficult in that scenario. So you do have organizations like WGU, got organizations that are individual community colleges. Some universities will have information technology, at least some type of information technology degree, but in more cases than not, they tend to mix in computer science classes, which have nothing to do with IT. It doesn't. Programming, application development, hardware development has nothing to do with IT. We don't do that. So pointless. Learning C++ doesn't help you. Now, learning scripting and automation, different question, but that's not computer science. That's information technology. So the universities really don't understand it, or they like throwing those classes in there because it makes them more revenue. What could it be? Maybe, could it be that? No, couldn't be that. So that's one of the challenges you have, is that very few places have a directed formal degree just in information technology, but other types of bachelor 4-year degree programs are just as applicable. Business management's a good one. I mean, even economics, I guess technically engineering could potentially be. It's kind of an overkill for the things that we're doing here. Oh, thank you, screensaver. Technically overkill for the things that we are doing here. But I think if you get a 2 or 4-year degree that is in something other than basket weaving, it's not technically a liberal arts type degree that at least has some technical value associated with it. I mean, liberal arts degrees are great if you're going into music, if you're going into literature, definitely liberal arts, but we're talking about information technology, even a degree in economics, something in business, something that is maybe in a technical or a science field is great. People like those. I think part of the 4-year degree appeal for employers still continues to be the fact that you were able to apply yourself for an extended period of time to get a relatively difficult degree, because they are. And these university degrees are not simple to get. You have to apply yourself. You have to learn. You have to sit in the library. You have to be able to get through all these classes, and you do it over an extended period of time. You're trainable. You are a very trainable person. That's what that 4-year degree says. And for somebody who's hiring you, that speaks pretty well. Well, I see here you have a 4-year degree in this topic. You're pretty trainable. Check. They like that. So those are 2 of the 4 elements: the industry certifications, formal education. Third one is you have some type of practical experience. In the video, I talk about creating your home lab. I give you some ideas of different home labs that you can do, so that when you walk into an interview, your very first interview, and you tell people about the firewall you installed, and you show them the reports of all of the people attacking your network when you install this firewall. There you go. There's your interview. There's one of your interview stories. So those types of things can be valuable. Imagine somebody showing up who's never had an IT job, and they're showing you reports of people who in their IT department haven't even created these reports. That's good stuff. That's the third one. The fourth one, I'm not sure what the weighting is on this, but it's probably pretty heavy. The fourth one is someone who already works there. Okay, that's that old adage of it's not what you know, but it is who you know. It's not really what the adage should be. It really should be, It's not just what you know, it is also who you know. All of these things work together, ideally. And we're not talking about you having some very personal knowledge of a person who works there. You hang out on the weekends, your families know each other, your kids go to school together. That's not what we're talking about. We're just talking about someone who is an acquaintance professionally, a professional acquaintance. That's what that is. Those are the people that you're connecting with on LinkedIn. You meet somebody, you add them to LinkedIn, that's a professional acquaintance. You've met them, you know where they work. Maybe you go, and this is the part of this that I'm getting to in this fourth section. How do you find those people? How do you know them? Where do you meet these people? Where are they? Well, you go to where they are. You go to where they are. One of the best ways to do this is user group meetings. Microsoft user group meeting, Palo Alto Network user group meetings. Go to a B-Sides security conference in your area. B, letter B, sides of a something, side of a carton, sides, S-I-D-E-S, B-Sides or similar. In our particular, I'm in Central Florida, so the Tampa area, Orlando area has even local user group meetings for different topics, security and other things. So you may find one of those in your area as well. Especially if you're in a very large area, if you live in Chicago, New York, you're in Seattle, you're in LA, really any relatively large area, you'll be able to find some of those meetings, some of those user groups. Go to the user group meeting. That's where those people are. Introduce yourself. Hey, where do you work? Oh, I'm doing this. Oh, I just got my degree. Ask people, are you hiring right now? Do you have a help desk? Are you hiring? Would you mind if I gave you my resume? This, by the way, is a very, very useful thing to do because in many companies, in almost every company, has some type of finder's fee employee recognition or employee program where if you bring in a resume and we hire that person, you get paid a bonus. There are people I have worked with who are really good at collecting resumes. They go collect all the resumes on their LinkedIn. Oh, if you want to work here, send me your resume. And they send it to HR, and that locks in their name with that person's resume. And if they hire that person, they get the finder's fee. They get the referral fee. So the employer referral programs are in practically any company you'll run into, which means it's not bad to ask someone, hey, can I give you my resume? In fact, you might not even be able to get to that point. As soon as you tell them, oh, I just got my degree, or I'm now in the market after earning my degree, they might already ask you, oh, send me your resume, because they're already thinking, oh, I can get them in the referral program. This is a win-win, by the way. So that's a great thing. If you can feel comfortable talking to people about, can I send you my resume? Okay, that's great. I'll send you my resume. I'll add you on LinkedIn, and I'll send you a LinkedIn message with my resume information. You can forward that on. There you go. You've done two things right there. You're now on their LinkedIn, and now they have your resume that they can forward on, and they probably will because they want some of that sweet, sweet referral money. That's good stuff. That referral, you didn't do anything, and you got some referral money. That's all good. So there's where those types of environments become very useful. And then, of course, when you go to the interview, they go, well, how did you find us? Oh, I met Fred at the Microsoft user group meeting. Yeah, I'm on his LinkedIn. You guys are doing great stuff here. I saw the project he's working on with the imaging, with the voice over IP, with the thing, with the cloud, whatever it is. And then you now have an understanding of what they are doing day to day at those companies, at a very high level, but you know someone who works there. And we want to hire people we know. We want to hire people we can trust. You know, hiring a random person off the street or nobody here can vouch for you, that's a much more difficult hire. I'm not saying it doesn't happen. Of course, that type of thing happens. It's just better if you know someone who's there. So those are the four things. If you have all four, that's great. If you have fewer than that, you know, it's not as great, but you at least have options and things you can do along those lines. That video goes into detail. It's a long video. It's like 30 minutes long. It's a big, long video, but it's chock full of info. And I think it's a good place to go if you are working towards getting that first job in IT Don't limit yourself. Don't try to think that you could be making more money doing something else somewhere else outside of the IT industry. You can't. It's telling you, you can't. The money is here in IT. There's plenty of cash to be made, but you have to apply yourself. There's a lot of people at the bottom levels. That's not where the money is. But if you learn, you apply yourself, you learn about these operating systems, you apply yourself and understand about the network side of things. You learn how to troubleshoot these environments. You learn how to design them, how they are implemented. Well, now you're at the upper levels of what we do in our industry, and therefore you are paid at the upper levels of what we do in our industry. And then if you go work for one of the big companies, the Palo Alto Networks of the world, the Network Generals of the world, the Ciscos of the world, those companies, those folks get paid pretty well. So you're even making more money to have that side of it, that piece of it. So there is flexibility. There is long-term financial support in this industry. And there's the ability to find something that interests you so that you can just do that every day. And if your interests change, you simply go do those, which is what I did in my career. So once you get into the world of understanding Windows desktop administration and you think, okay, I got this now, I'm very comfortable with this, let's go learn about the servers. Now the whole nother world of things opens up, the Active Directory and the implementation of the services on the back end. And then when you get into that, you think, what's going on over the network? Let's learn all about the packets. Let's learn about how this is connected. Let's learn about switching. Let's learn about routing. Let's learn about how we would implement those and design them and put them onto people's networks. Then once you got that, let's do it all with security. Now that we know about the operating system, now that we know about the network, now that we understand where the data is going, now we can protect it. That's the process. It doesn't happen overnight. This is years and years and years of your hard work. This is years of your study. This is years of projects. This is years of going from company to project to build your knowledge base, to build that foundation so that eventually you will get to a point where you're making way more than the bartender ever did or even could hope to. That's the process. And it's something that every single one of you who is on this live stream today or is watching the replay, you can do that. People, we do this all the time. This is what IT is about. It's what drives us to make our training courses. It's what drives us to do these live events. It's what drives us to do everything that we do because we know that there is the ability for you to not only be happy with what you are doing, but to also create a career that you're able to use to support not just yourself, but your family as well. And then have flexibility to do whatever you'd like to do in your off hours. I mean, that's what we want to be able to do with that and make that happen. Hopefully that's given you some things to think about, some ideas that might help you with your studies, some things that might help you understand if you really want to get into IT or not. It is an area of technology that has been very, very interesting for me throughout my career, and it has been one that has provided me and my family with the things that I've talked about. I would not be telling you about this had I not gone through this myself. So hopefully that's given you some ideas. Check out that video on how to get a job in IT with no experience. Maybe it will pique some interest for you, and you can think about better strategies of getting a job for yourself in the world of information technology. Well, I think that it covers what we needed to do in our after show. We did a little bit of overtime. I hope that's okay. Went a little bit past the top of the hour, but hopefully it's given you some things to think about. Thank you so much for joining us today. As always, our next live event is available at our calendar, professormesser.com/calendar. If you have a look at it right now, you'll see that next Wednesday at 12 noon Eastern, we have our Security Plus study group, where I will have all new questions from the Security Plus exam objectives. We effectively have the same format, but it's all about security. If that's something that interests you, we would love you to come back and join us for that one as well. We always have a good time with our study groups. Thank you so much for joining us. We could not do these without you, and we appreciate everything that you have provided, not just in this hour, but everything that you do for us every day. We have such a good time doing this. I'll be over on Discord after this, along with a number of you. If you want to meet some folks who are studying for their certifications, it's a great place to go at professormesser.com/Discord. Thanks so much for being here. We will see you next time on the Network Plus Study Group. Thanks, everybody.